to open the hearing for the Harwich Conservation Commission for October 17th, 2018. We have first on the agenda a request for determination of applicability for the Barnes property in 18 South Chatham Road, construction of a new two-car garage. Do we have a representative here?
For that one?
Okay.
Hold on. Let me see who the applicant was besides the homeowner. There was a representative for it. Let's just maybe put it at the end.
Yeah, well, if they come up, we can slide them in.
Whatever you
Okay.
prefer.
Next, we have a request for amended order of condition for Taylor Realty Trust, 17 and 23 Soundview Road, changes to the view corridor management and restoration plan.
Good evening. For the record, I'm Jen Crawford from Crawford Land Management, here representing Paul and Jean Ayub, who are in the audience with us tonight, as well as Nick Crawford from Crawford Land Management. So we were first involved with this project. This is a project that you guys permitted not that long ago for vista management of 3 different view corridors. We're here tonight trying to amend 2 of those view corridors. We were first brought onto the project by the Ayubs to implement what was originally permitted with the vista management. And in reviewing the project with them and the approved documents, we actually suggested that the Ayubs, that there may be another way to achieve the same goal in a more long-term sustainable and ecological manner. So in discussing that with them, we have brought that project before you tonight for further review. Rather than continuously prune the vegetation to meet a height requirement, we felt that there was an opportunity here to provide a transition in plant community within the view corridor that would result in the restoration of an S3 ranked priority habitat for conservation by NHESP, where this type of plant community, a maritime shrubland, can grow to its full mature height without the need for ever being pruned. Therefore, in the long term, basically eliminating human interference within the buffer zone. So with the transition of this plant community, rather than just the pruning of what's there, we felt that we could provide a higher species diversity within the view corridors, as well, as I said, reduce the overall human interaction within the buffer zone, while increasing the ability of the buffer to filter stormwater, as well as increasing the ability of the buffer to buffer floodwaters with the establishment of native grasses in the area. One thing that the previously approved plans did provide was a framework for restoration planting. They called for a species list, but they didn't provide a quantity or sizes. So we have submitted to you 2 actual restoration plans for the view corridors that show specific plants, their general locations, the sizes and quantities of them, which is kind of a next level of detail, so to speak, that the previous plans did not provide. With that being said, that basically sums up what we are proposing that you consider for amendment. I know you have a very long agenda, so I will keep my presentation very brief, and if you have questions, we will do our very best to answer them for you.
Thank you. Amy, do you have a summary for us?
Just real quickly, this is a great idea for this property. There's a lot of vegetation that has been previously mismanaged, and starting essentially with those that have been mismanaged, starting fresh with new plantings is the most viable option, and it will create less intrusion in the long run into that area. It won't be going and pruning annually necessarily anymore. It appears to be a fairly dense native planting. So this is a really good way to manage and accomplish both getting a view, creating species diversity and habitat, and ensuring stability of a coastal bank. So I don't have any questions about that. Something I do have to point out, we went to the site today and noticed, so on your past order of conditions, there were conditions about fertilization. And the back lawn area right at the top of the coastal bank had been aerated, And correct us if we're wrong, but it did appear that there were fertilizers freshly applied within the 50-foot buffer zone there. So that's just, it is not in your orders. I mean, we talked extensively about fertilization, and in the 0 to 50, it just should not be. So, but other than that, I didn't have a chance really to bring it up prior to the meeting because we saw it literally like late this afternoon. But we can, for the plan itself, and I don't think that should hold up this. I think we need to make it known that that's not supposed to be occurring. But the plan that we have in front of us is, it's a good plan for the property.
Thanks, Amy. Let's go around the table. Any comments, Ernie?
Well, following up on Amy, are the property owners here tonight?
Yes, they are.
And have you been fertilizing?
No, I had no idea, honestly. I mean, we have a service that does it. I thought they knew they were not supposed to do it, but I'll let them know, and I'll give you my assurance they will do it. It's the first time we've been down here in a few weeks,
I
and
understand.
so
Yeah.
I appreciate the information. As Amy will tell you, I think we work with constantly doing
They
every
do.
regulation. I feel like we go above and beyond to the extent we can, so.
It was hopefully just a miscommunication. We'll make note of it, but I know the AUBs. I'm assured that as soon as we're done, first thing tomorrow morning, they'll be on the phone with their contractor saying, hey, you can't be doing that anymore, so.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, thank you. I have no other questions.
Thanks. Any comments?
No, actually, I like the concept that you've laid out. It seems very sensible.
Thank you.
Jim, any comments?
So that view corridor is essentially the entire shaded area. It's the two dashed lines coming from 23 Soundview.
Yes, yes, and they are the exact same view corridors that were approved in the original order. So
Right.
nothing has changed in terms of areas.
So that particular one goes those few hundred feet down the bank, basically.
Yes, that's correct. Directly adjacent to the marsh.
What's the plan for in between these plantings on the plan?
Yep, so what would happen is after any of the vegetation that's approved for removal is taken out, all of it's taken out by hand, so as not to disturb soils. If there are some invasive species present, not many, there's not a ton in these two view corridors. Each of those would be cut stem by stem and treated. Our invasive management techniques would be consistent with what was previously approved. Once the area, any vegetation has been moved, any native shrubs that are there would remain. There would be no reason, since we're restoring a maritime shrubland, there would be absolutely no reason to remove them. There's not much in there. There's a few arrowwood viburnum. There's some American hazelnut, which is wonderful. And so those would be left in place. The area would be seeded with a native grass mix, and then it would be blanketed with erosion control blankets. That's one detail that the previous plan did not discuss, was any sort of temporary erosion control measures. So we, in an area such as this, with this type of a slope, we always include erosion control blankets. The ones that we use are typically 18-month blankets, which are a composite of coir and straw woven with jute, so they're 100% biodegradable. The stakes that we use are 12-inch hardwood stakes. The blankets are trenched in at the bottom and the top of the slope, and then staked in between. Blankets overlap a minimum of 6 inches. And what those blankets really function to do is, while we've seeded everything under the blankets, obviously the the seed needs time to germinate, grow, establish roots. So we have a transition that occurs during that first season where we get the germination, they come up through the blankets. While those grasses are establishing, the blankets serve to hold soils in place so we don't have any erosion. So there would be, basically for the first growing season, there would be grasses that are starting to establish. Usually we don't complete the restoration planting component until we've gone through one full growing season, so that we have the ability to treat and manage any sort of annual weed species, invasive species that may be coming back from seed bank. So the following fall is typically when the restoration plantings would be installed. So it would end up at first being more predominantly grasses because the native shrubs that go in are smaller, and then over the years they will start to transition, and as those shrubs colonize, the native grasses will kind of filter themselves out and continue to grow in the most optimum conditions. We do have cool season and warm season grasses that we seed, as well as Deschamps is one of the main cool season grasses that we see that thrives in shady conditions. So I would expect that underneath the shrubs or where it's shadier against that kind of woodland edge, the Deschamps over time would persist versus the blue stem would kind of peter out and remain in the sunnier open areas.
So you foresee between the new plantings and the existing native shrubs that it would be something close
Yes.
to like a thicket type?
Yeah, the native grasses that we seed, depending on the seed mix, typically those are going to be anywhere from 30 inches, 3 feet tall. If there's switchgrass, then we will have much taller. The switchgrass would likely do the best right along the marsh edge where it has a little bit of wet feet, and that gets much taller.
All right, that's all.
I'm also,
All set, Stan? John?
I don't have any questions. I support this proposal.
I guess just some background questions from me on, do you expect this will need management down the road, like 5, 10 years down the road? Will this need some type of management?
I would expect that we would continue working with the AUBs and with the commission in whatever capacity Amy would direct us to be able to come in and maintain the area free of invasive species. I would not anticipate that this area would require pruning. That would be the whole impetus for us transitioning this plant community. Typically what we find, and again, this area is not highly invaded, so I don't anticipate, and it's also, what's growing there is, because it's not highly invaded, it's fairly native, so I don't anticipate that there's going to be a large seed bank of annual weed species or European velvet grass or anything else that we're going to get here. So I think even at the end of the second growing season, while we're still under the active permit, I would anticipate that we would have some really good, solid coverage on these areas. We would, as I said, hopefully want to continue working with the AUBs and with Amy just to make sure that we can keep the high quality habitat value and ecological viability that we have restored valid.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And so, Amy, it's an amendment. Are we keeping the other orders that came with the?
The key changes would be the plan of record changes, so I changed that in the orders. Essentially, that's really it. That's going to change.
Right.
We have conditions in there about chemical application. They are certified applicators, so that's not going to change. We said if there was another contractor on the job, they have to prove themselves that they can do the job. They, in my professional opinion, they can. They're good at it. So I'll go through, but I think all the other standard conditions are going to stay the same.
Right. So right now we have no fertilizer in the 0 to 50.
Correct.
Or is it the 0 to 100?
It's 0 to 50. No
50.
Herbicides other than what's allowed for the invasives within the buffer altogether. Keep in mind this is also riverfront area, so you don't just have the 100-foot buffer, you have the 200-foot riverfront area.
Yeah.
So the whole property is jurisdictional. I have them right here.
I didn't get out there. Amy, what type of fertilizer did you see today?
Mark saw it better than I did, so.
It was already starting to break down as a typical granular fertilizer,
Right.
multicolored, so obviously it was,
Yeah.
different sources.
So let me just take a quick peek through the conditions and make sure we don't have anything else to change. The first glance through, I really didn't see much.
I did review the order of conditions, and I don't remember any condition that was contradictory
Right.
to what this would be or that would prohibit anything, at least not based on my memory.
They still have to do monitoring. There's still a stipulation that the plants have to survive at least 2 growing seasons prior to request for a certificate of compliance. Growing or above ground irrigation, temporary irrigation can be for 2 to 3 growing seasons. You know, we always like to see after 2, if it needs it, we can keep it in for another season or so, but we'll see how that goes.
Typically in a little bit more sheltered location than this, we usually, unless we've had some really crazy summers or something, it's not necessary after 2 seasons.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you're on a really exposed coastal bank, that 3rd season is helpful, but
There's nothing in, other than if you don't have any changes to what their proposal is, other than switching out the plans and making this the new plan of record, there's nothing that should be changed.
Good. I'm just concerned about the fertilizer application. I'm
gonna make a note of
Just
it.
discussed that, it's fresh on everyone's mind, and then bingo, it happens.
Right.
That's
Can
really.
issue a warning if you like.
May I just address that? We have a
Hold
Sure.
on.
service. And we told the service, they obviously didn't put it in their record, we'll let them know. This is not, I don't do it, for better or worse, I don't do this myself. We had communicated it. And obviously it got mixed. And we were at the house today for the first time in a few weeks. I didn't even go to the backyard to know. So we comply with everything. There's going to be no issue here. And
I understand where you're coming from, but I think from our perspective, it's a pretty significant issue because we talk about this a lot.
I understand.
And it
From my
comes up a
perspective,
lot.
what I'm saying is, you told us, as Amy will tell you, we comply with it. Firstly, we go above and beyond, and there's going to be no issue. We will let them know again. If they do it again, we will not retain them. I'm giving you my assurance that we respect what the Conservation Commission does and the regulations. It's not, I just
Yeah.
want to assure you that. So you can issue a warning whatever you wish, it's fine, but person to person, I'm communicating to as citizens of, and the reason we're back here to even do this is because we think this is a better plan. It's going to be more expensive for us, we're happy to do it. I just want you to understand how we're coming from, so I think
Yeah,
we can test that. So.
I think we all agree to that, and I think, we support your plan. But I think that the trend that I see is just really non-compliance, just continuous non-compliance to this issue. It's not a rare occurrence. The fertilizer is applied in the 0 to 50, so I'm concerned about it.
And I share your concern. I'm agreeing with you. We're in violent agreement with each other, is what I would tell you. So.
Yeah. Any thoughts on this issue from the commissioners? You guys were out there today.
Well, I guess I would like to say that in spite of your protestations, it's really your responsibility to make sure that whoever you're contracting with abides by the rules. And if I'm not sure what the right way to deal with it is, except that you have to deal with it. And somehow the point has to get made to the contractors, to the landscapers, and I know a lot of landscapers don't really take these kinds of issues very seriously. We go
have
out
the
there.
opportunity to enforce to the contractor too. I don't know who
Well,
the contractor is.
That might be something
Can
to
we
consider.
send a warning to the contractor?
Yes.
Okay.
If they will be so kind as to tell us who that contractor is. So you don't have to do it in a public forum. That's fine. You can send me an email.
You know who it is. So.
Yeah. If it's the same person I've met on the site a couple of times, then yes.
I think that would be nice to send a warning to the contractor.
Sure.
Okay, do we have a motion on the amended order of conditions?
Question, Brad. Do we have the ability to find the contractor?
We could find the proponent and the contractor for violating the order of conditions.
So that would be in the warning letter, correct?
Yeah, this is a warning. If it,
That would be
And-
very specific that if we find there are future violations, then
Yeah.
there would be fines.
right.
For a motion or further comments?
I'll make a motion to approve the request to amend the order of conditions for the Realty Trust at 1723 Sandview Road.
I second.
You have a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
None opposed, motion carries.
Send these around for signature. If you don't have any.
Yeah, we covered both. Both.
There are two. We announced it for 17 and
Okay,
22.
And that votes for both.
Yes. Please sign these.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the applicant for the first hearing is here. It's up to
Okay.
you if you want to take them now or
Sure.
later.
Thank you. Yeah, let's take them now.
Okay.
We're not really far behind. So next we have a request for termination of applicability for the Barnes property on 18 South Chatham Road, construction of a two-car garage.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm George Riley, representing the Barnes. They would like to construct a two-car garage with a bedroom above, and a portion of that foundation lies within the zone above elevation 11, flood elevation zone. The entry to the garage is from Brentwood Road, so the slab elevation of the garage is well above the flood elevation. So it's really just building up that foundation at that corner. There's really no, I think, significant vegetation coming down, and I don't foresee any drainage issues, so I don't see any impact on the resource.
Thank you. Any comments, Amy?
The only thing is the site has already been cleared to some extent. I would have just, granted it's flood zone, it's not within the 100-foot buffer to resource areas, but work shouldn't be started until after they come to us. In this case, there's no detriment, but we'll just want to convey that to the owner.
Right.
And, but other than that, I don't foresee how this proposed addition, which kind of straddles, it's on the very outer edge of the AE11 zone. I don't see how this proposed addition is going to have any adverse impact to abutting properties in the event of a 100-year storm event. So I'm recommending approval of it with a -2. Just with the stipulation, I'd like to see not just the runoff from the proposed addition, but we did notice like a lot of downspouts just running off
Well,
on the property. So just, I would like,
we have a
incorporate
proposed
all of
dry
them.
well outside the flood zone.
right,
Take care of all the runoff from the roof runoff and
from the whole house.
from the whole addition and all the disturbed area on that
Okay.
side.
Something we should have caught when we saw this, and maybe we did, and I actually haven't looked at the old orders, because this came in front of us not too long ago for
Right,
other
for
work.
the, for
But
the,
roof runoff from the house, I mean, we can't really control what's outside the 100-foot
Right.
buffer, outside the flood zone, but anything within jurisdiction, the corners of the
I
house
think a lot of that had to
should be
do with
incorporated.
when they installed the new septic system, they
Yeah.
disturbed a lot of that hill. And they
Okay,
didn't want to do anything about it until they put the garage up.
gotcha, okay,
So,
those are my comments, I think the roof runoff should go on the ground.
Any comments from the commissioners?
Do you have any idea what their plans are for the second story of the new addition?
for the second story, I have the plans, I think are in there.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah, so that's the
I
plan.
saw a toilet, but I didn't see it,
Well, it's just a bedroom, it's not like anything.
not an apartment or anything?
No.
Okay, all right. No, I don't know, no other questions.
I don't see it having any adverse impact at all. Build it.
Jim?
Just trying to tell if any of that clearing was done in the 100-foot wetland setback.
I don't think it was, no. Almost certainly it
We have no limit of work here. I know
was. Right.
we looked in there, it seems kind of like the whole north side of the property was cleared.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much the area on this side of the garage, the lower garage, which is outside the BBW according to this anyway, but as far as I know, there was no clearing.
Yeah, that's something I really can't tell, Amy. I don't know if you can.
It's pretty, I would say, so where we were in the driveway, the clearing, if we were pointing ahead, the clearings kind of started in front of us, so it was probably right on the 100-foot line, roughly. But we can condition an RDA, so we can also say, no clearing in the 100-foot without permission, which kind of goes without saying, they shouldn't be doing that anyway, but put it in there. Also, the whole, like we were talking about before, fertilization and things like that shouldn't be occurring within the buffer zone either. But the flood zone is also our jurisdiction, so clearing that happened there, which they did, for the septic, they came in front of us, that was probably 6 to 12 months ago. But I don't know why as much, so where the septic was cleared, but also where the proposed addition is within the flood zone, heading towards that 100-foot buffer, that was all cleared, and I don't know if that had much to do with the septic system, so. But we can kind of tartan that up.
Pay grade on that, I don't.
I know, it's not your
Right.
part of the project, I
Right.
understand. I can look into their old file a little bit more for the septic, but we can condition the RDA. I don't think there was clearing into the 100, but it was close.
Sorry, it was very close.
I'd have to go
if
back
if
and take a
wasn't.
look.
Yeah, I didn't study that today, but without
Yeah.
limit of work and with all that area cleared, it's very difficult to tell if it was in the setback.
Would it be amenable to put a limit of work extending from the northeast corner of the Shell driveway, where
Yeah.
the 10.7 is, and carry that out to the corner of the proposed addition, say 5 to 8 feet off of it, to give them work
Yeah.
around
Yeah,
room?
if we went parallel to the edge of the house,
Yeah,
extend that back to the north property line, I
That'd be
don't see
good.
any problem with that.
just a trench silt fence should do it
Yeah.
there.
It seems fine, but maybe when they do put that silt fence in, you can check to see if it was cleared within the 100.
Well, I'm probably gonna go out the next chance I get to look at that anyway.
Yeah, because it
Now-
may have been, because we were in the driveway, it was kind of.
Yep, I can take a look.
Well, give me a call.
Yeah, sure.
I'm still not clear on what we've decided with any of the downspouts on the house, Amy. Is that something we can still condition as part of
Ones
this?
that are jurisdictional, you can. So here's the flood zone is the dotted line
Right.
here. So if, like this one here on the corner wasn't, it's pretty easy to put it in, it would be great to see that done at this time. Anything in the front of the house, if there are downspouts, I think that was covered in the old order, maybe that hasn't been finished, that work might not have been all
Okay.
completely finished yet. We really can't condition stuff
Okay,
over
well, I was
here.
concerned on the one in the back that we saw, because it
Yeah,
looked
by
like
the
it was all
retaining wall.
flowing downhill.
Right, yeah, because it does all pitch towards that side wetland there, the BVW, on the abutting property.
So that, yeah, that's the one I was probably most concerned about.
I would just say permit or condition that any roof, any downspouts within the commission's jurisdiction need to go into dry wells. Make it easy.
Okay.
Sure. And that's the intent anyway, so.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all.
John, any comments?
I have no comment.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the RDA for Charles and Cheryl Barnes at 18 South Chatham Road, the construction of a two-car garage.
-3?
2,
-2.
it's in a resource area technically. Flood zone.
All right, we have a second?
Second.
TechNet, all those in favor say aye. Aye. None opposed, motion carries.
Please sign. We'll call you when it's ready. Good. Thanks. You're welcome. Anytime? Here.
I passed my pen on.
Next, we
I got a
have
couple,
a
don't worry.
Yeah, you can
request
use
for
that.
extension permit for Dark Hollow Realty Trust, Route 28, 2261 Route 28, head of the Bay Road, deck addition, landscape improvements, and coastal bank enhancements.
They're not present. I didn't think they really needed to be. It's a 1-year extension. They're trying to finish the work up, essentially, and they want, put it Nikki, right? They want in time. Work is complete, but coastal engineering hasn't been able to get out with a crew to do it as-built, and they want to make sure everything is in order before applying for a cert of compliance. But the order is ready, set to expire, so
Okay?
I'd recommend just a 1-year extension for them.
Okay, well, I move that we have a 1-year extension for the existing permit at 2261 Route 28, head of the Bay Road. Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Please sign.
Motion carries, none opposed.
We do have somebody here for the next one.
Okay. This is also a request for extension for the permit for the O'Donnell property at 55 Sugar Hill Drive, remodel deck with retaining wall.
Hi, how you doing?
So I'm here, I wrote a letter to the commission on the 18th of September and wanted to get ahead of the expiration for my current order of conditions, which expired 10/5/2018. But as Amy told me, that as long as I had my request in, that I was fine. Not sure if you guys have had a chance to see the letter, but basically, I was granted an order of conditions. The project basically entails some foundation work. I'm right up against Muddy Creek. It's a pretty complicated and expensive project, and long and short of it, I just haven't had the money, so I'm asking for an extension. Really, I'd ideally like 3 years. You know, I don't want to have to keep coming back. I do want to get this done. I'm motivated, but yeah, it's been more of an economic issue.
And your concern about Muddy Creek, the opening of Muddy Creek changing the stability of your banking, I'd be happy, and, I mean, to try to work with you, and, because I've worked with the other homeowners who had impacts, what anticipated impacts or wasn't anticipated for yours, but if there is impact due to that, if your engineer has kind of shown that, I'd be happy to work with you in the town to look into that, because.
Yeah, I mean, there's pretty visible impacts. I have a row of hedgerow bushes that's just folding into the river.
Yeah.
And obviously, if I'm doing foundation work on my house, I need to.
Don't want that.
Yeah, I'm gonna want to make sure that the surrounding area have taken the appropriate countermeasures. So, you know, obviously, I'm just here to get an extension, but I wouldn't be surprised if I'm back before you amending that order at some point due to whatever we uncover.
I don't want you to think the town is gonna just say.
No, I know, and
So we'll
I
work
know
with you
when
on that.
a big project like Muddy Creek, which overall is very positive, I love it, the water's clean. This is recorded, but I caught a 37-inch bass way back in
Nice.
Muddy Creek like 2 weeks ago. So it's been great.
Yeah.
And but it is. I'm seeing some negative impacts, so I want to
We
just
can look at
stay on
that
top
with
of
you
it.
too.
Yeah.
'Cause
Thank you.
if this is a result of the town of our project, you know, we don't want to make sure we've had a negative impact on somebody's property.
Is it an obvious increase in tidal amplitude or increase in velocity? What is happening?
Definitely the increase in tidal amplitude.
Yeah.
It used to
You're
only
getting
go
about
up and
foot
down
more
maybe
water.
a foot.
Yep.
Now it depends on the moon cycle, but it can come up, 3 or 4 feet.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's pretty significant,
And
especially.
it goes out as well, so.
Yeah, and it goes down.
Yeah.
But, I think there was always I had some settling in this foundation issue in 2013 when I came here, but the river wasn't open at that point.
Right.
And so, but now I feel like it's just increased the rate of erosion. I have a kind of a lean-to roof. There's some pilings there, but they're probably only 6 inches deep. One of them is just like going like that towards the river, so I just want to make sure I have a handle on all that stuff, and then obviously it won't be a cheap project, so I'm just, working on getting that funding.
You've got, what, a 30-foot bank there, probably?
I guess it depends,
Quiet.
it's pretty steep.
It's pretty,
Yeah, I mean, I'm not worried about flooding.
No.
Yeah.
that's what I'm
If
trying
my
to get
house
across.
floods, then we're all in
We're
trouble.
all in trouble.
But more the erosion, and I've had some engineers kind
Undermining.
of casually look at it, and basically water's not your friend all the time. So,
Any change in plant community at this point, or too soon for that?
I mean, this is a whole nother rabbit hole, but there's a lot of Japanese knotweed,
Oh,
really bad, that is on town property and my property where they abut.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take up too much of the time tonight, but that's something that I would love to understand how best to remediate that. That stuff is just, not really responsive, and I know from just other engineers that I've spoken to that the towns really like to kind of take that on. And again, I don't want to get out over my skis on this, but that's something that might be a future issue. And but there's other than that, that's just been accelerated. I don't know if that has anything to do with the river, but no real change. Actually, yeah, some of the trees that are around on Muddy Creek, due to the increased salinity,
Yeah.
they're just not doing well. I have a tree, and with the winds last winter and spring, a lot of trees are going down. I have some
Pines?
trees on my property that
Pine
I'm worried
trees or-
about.
Pines and oaks, you see it more noticeably right at the mouth, or right where the bridge is. I mean, that's just, they're all dead. But that, we were expecting that. I mean, you're expecting a change in plant community. We are starting to see die-off and marsh migration farther up in the creek where Mr. O'Donnell is. And, I mean, there's nothing, it's a gradual process, especially up there where you do have a lot of freshwater intrusion coming in. But we're also seeing the stands of Phragmites shift and decrease in size too because of the increased salinity. So there's it's more gradual up in the upper reaches than it is right at the entrance, but it is happening, which we anticipate.
Good. Any comments from anybody on this? It's a pretty straightforward request.
Have the engineers given you any idea as far as timeline, or, you know, you mentioned that some of the posts are already leaning.
I mean, timeline for what is when they could do the work, or?
When you should remediate by before
No,
this.
I mean, I don't think it's imminent. What I've done is made some markings on my foundation, right? And if they move, you know, even a little bit, they'll know. In their observation, you know, it's like, yeah, this is happening. But they're like, I've not been told, like, hey, if you don't fix this in 12 months, your house is gonna fall in the river. It's not that bad. It's just more that when I perform the work that's been permitted or, you know, consented or whatever, I may have to, there might be some deeper considerations due to these factors.
So 3 years is.
Yeah, and, you know, I would hope to have it done, yeah, I mean, that gives me plenty of time, and, you know, I certainly don't mind coming back, and I may have to come back before you anyways, in the meantime.
Okay. No other questions? I move we approve the request for extension for 55 Sugar Hill Drive.
Second.
Second it. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries, none opposed.
Please sign. We'll send it to your boss to address.
Okay, no, I live here now.
Oh,
That's my
okay.
only address.
All right.
Thank you. Thanks.
Make a note of
Thanks.
that. We'll
Okay.
just call you when it's ready, if that's even easier for you. Or-
Yeah, that's fine, or you can mail it to me.
Okay.
Okay, next we have a notice of intent for the Carney property at 6 Saquatucket Point, proposed maintenance, dredging, and beach nourishment.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Charlie Agro from Coastal Engineering. I'm here again for the Jim Carney Dredging project at the end of Saquatucket Harbor. The way we last left things a couple of weeks ago, we're going to come back based on the termination from the Natural Heritage Endangered Species Program. We received a comment from them yesterday morning that basically said the original plan for beach nourishment showed the nourishment profile would include a 1-on-4 slope down to mean high water, and the 1-on-4 slope is too steep for the piping plover habitat, so they suggested that we change, or they told us to change the slope to a 8-to-1 at the steepest slope to accommodate the shorebird habitat, and in an attempt to meet that slope requirement and fill all of the dredge material from the marina, from the slip area and the adjacent shoal along the bulkhead. We included nourishment on the dune of the property as well. I spoke to Amy today, and nourishment along the dune itself doesn't sound like something that's very desirable to the something that would be permitted. So we're hoping that we can move forward with a determination for the project under the plan to revise this plan to remove the nourishment within the dune and only nourish the beach with the 8-to-1 slope. And when it comes time for construction, we'd be looking for permission from the adjacent property owners here to nourish the beach, moving in this direction as well to contain the rest of the cubic yardage of sand from the dredging aspect of the project. One thing we can also do when it comes time for construction, depending on how the adjacent property owners feel and how much sand they can that we can place along the beach going in that direction, we can dredge the slip area first, which I think is the area that Jim Carney is most concerned about dredging. And we can see how much sand that ends up with on the beach. And as they continue dredging along the bulkhead, once we fill up the area and there's not enough or there's too much sand to continue from there, we can stop the dredging. And next time they dredge the harbor, and another couple of years after that, they can continue to dredge within the permit. But right now what we're hoping for is a permit to dredge the area that was discussed at the last hearing. Everybody's aware of within the slip area and along the bulkhead itself here, and to place the nourishment on the beach, and in accordance with the natural heritage letter, maintain a slope no greater than 8-to-1.
Thank you. Any comments, Amy?
Yes, so we have the letter from Heritage. No nourishment should take place between April 1 and August 31st. If they're in this particular area, we haven't had plovers in several years, so I think this is just precautionary, really. But they could be there. It is viable habitat potential, especially with the dunes there. So, when Charlie and I spoke on the phone, actually placement of more than just a couple of inches on a dune at any one given time doesn't allow for the native vegetation to respond and grow through it. So placement of a couple of feet of sand, and also the disturbance of either a machine down there or pumping it up in a slurry, would potentially compromise the dune, and it kind of changes the scope of the project. So my recommendation is to kind of go back to where we were originally. It's going to be less sand because you're only going to do from the seaward toe of the dune to mean high water at that 8-to-1 slope, not a 4-to-1 slope. So it's going to be less sand, but we also have a town-wide nourishment, beach nourishment plan permit that allows not just town properties, but private property owners to place sand when they own shorefront property above the mean high water line, but not on vegetation. So it's very feasible. The people in this neighborhood have taken advantage of the town's offer for sand, basically at rate, when we've dredged the harbor. So I think there's opportunity for them to get rid of the rest of the sand there. I can't recommend placement of it on the dune. I hope we don't have to dewater it on site. So I would recommend approval. Right now, we wouldn't be able to get rid of all the sand on this current property, but we can always say before a project, put a condition in that before the project is to commence, that we are to have correspondence of where the rest of the sand is going. Or if you're just going to elect not to do the entire thing at one time, because we dredge Saquatucket the channel like every year or every other year, they're going to do part of it one year and part of it the next. So you would just need to provide us with basically a plan very similar to the plan you had first, but instead say an 8-to-1 slope. And I would recommend approval pending receipt of that plan in the next couple of days. Saw fit too. So.
And I was able to make a draft of what that plan would look like. If you want to just
take a quick peek, sure. Thank you.
Basically, just the first revision of the plan, just the beach nourishment profile was changed from what it was to be able to fit the 1,500 cubic yards of sand. Now it was modified to be the 8-to-1 slope, which basically matches the existing slope. So it would, where the beach kind of flattens out there, it would extend up to the dune and tie in about 2 feet up on the dune or so.
That would be fine.
And I can get that
That's consistent with how
stamped.
we do our nourishment.
Mm-hmm.
It looks pretty good. So what we care about is the profile over here.
Right.
And then also, it had been shown that there was some renourishment up in here, but we can't do that.
And I was at the beach before the hearing here, and the area where the cross section is shown on the plan is actually the tightest area to fit nourishment.
Yes.
Looking down towards a jetty, there is a little bit more room, and then looking to the east, there is also more room along the beach there, and then there's also the rock groin system out in the other direction, so I'm sure some of those property owners would be interested in some of the sand as well.
Ernie, do you want to start questions?
I have one.
Okay. All right.
Nope, I have no questions.
No comment.
Mhm.
The only question I have is where you say maybe the second year
Mm-hmm.
do the rest. What would change that you'd be able to get rid of that sand in the second year?
Right, so let's say when we first go to do the actual dredging, and if we have permission from the adjacent property owner and not the other one, so we have a set area that we have to fit whatever we're gonna dredge.
Sure.
So if we dredge the slip area and we hit that quota,
Right.
if you wanna call it that, 2 years goes by, I mean, just based
Then some
on
of those-
erosion and.
Erosion, okay.
Exactly, so then, you know.
So it's a matter of judging what
Right.
you'd be able to.
Yeah, and we'd
back in
base it
and
on.
Get back to your 8-to-1.
Right.
in the
Exactly.
remaining area.
Yep.
Gotcha.
And as long as it's an 8-to-1 slope and above the mean high water, we'd survey the dredge site before the project. We'd survey the beach site before the project to figure out how much needs to come out, how much needs to get placed, and we would prioritize it based on what Mr. Carney is interested in. If
So
the
would-
shoal is.
So would that be a new project every year at that?
Nope.
No.
So this is maintenance. So, well, the dredging itself is maintenance. It's up to the commission. I mean, we'd put language in there as long as they complied with these parameters. It could be a maintenance
Mhm.
project. We'll address that
Okay.
in order of conditions. If you didn't feel comfortable with that, if you wanted to see some checks and balances along the way, we can do that too. But as long as these conditions don't change, like the plan doesn't change, they wouldn't have to come back year to year.
Okay.
And I think the maintenance permit is a 5-year permit, or is it a 10-year permit?
Depends on the entity.
I say.
We
I know
have done
Chapter
a couple of
91.
our typical permit is 3 years,
Mhm.
but we have on occasion I think for Beach Nursery for the town, we did a 5-year. And then also there is the language that the commission can discuss when we draft the orders of conditions about allowing future maintenance.
Right.
You know, if you ask for extension permits or if we just allow maintenance after the certificate of compliance.
Okay. That's all I have.
So I just wanted to clarify, you're connecting a second year dredging with the schedule for dredging Saquatucket, the public channel. Are you saying that you would have the same dredging operation, continue with dredging, and then are you then depositing the spoils elsewhere? Or are you still going to be trying to get it onto this beach or a neighbor's beach?
I think it depends on when it comes time for the project to start. It depends on the permissions that we get from the nearby property owners. If we have, let's say, all I show is up to the second property over. If the next few properties over are all in approval and would like to have the sand, and then there's somewhere to put all of the sand, we'd be able to dredge the entire area in one event. However, if only Mr. Carney and his adjacent property owner are interested in taking the sand, then we'd fill it up with as much as we can, hit the limit of the area, and then we'd have to wait and then come back. Just a possibility, I guess, if we had to go that route. Ideally, we would hope to get permission from any of the property owners that we would need to fit the full 1,500 cubic yards of sand, and that's subject to change too. And by the time they dredge, it might be more, might be less, based on which way the sand's moving. But
Okay, and have you calculated how much sand will be accommodated on Mr. Carney's property?
Yes, right now with the, on that draft plan that's there with the 8-to-1 slope, that would be about 350 to 400 cubic yards of
So
sand.
I see.
Mhm.
It's like 20%.
Yeah.
Right, so we'd kind of, look for approval from the next guy and then the next owner over and kind of go down the line and fill up as much as we
And
can.
also too, I know that the Winchmere Pines Association on the other side of the channel,
Mhm.
when we dredge, they often want sand, and at times, we don't have enough to go around.
Right.
So it's not just this side of the channel, but you could look, just make it
Yeah,
onto the
well,
other
that came
to
up
look at
today.
the-
Is that where when you guys dredge Saquatucket, is that where most of the sand goes to the other
Yep,
side
yep.
there?
It's called the Winchmere Pines Association.
Okay, so that's another option as well. I'm sure, Jim probably would want some on his beach as well, but if it's only 300, 400 cubic yards, meanwhile, Saquatucket and this other area are getting maybe
Yeah.
10,000 cubic yards of dredging, it might not even be worth it. It might just be better
All the
off.
pipe
to-
is there, it's easy enough to
Exactly,
move,
just, yep.
and it's up to him. I mean,
Right.
we have no say. He can charge, he can ask people for, funding for the sand too.
Right.
So, that's not up to us.
Mhm.
But
So
if
that's
he has
another
excess
option then.
sand, it's not a terrible problem to have.
Right.
Well, I mean, it is, we have to dredge it and get rid of it, but
Mm-hmm.
some people are starving for sand, so on the Cape.
All set, John?
Okay.
Okay, I got a couple. Did we resolve the status of the third float in the plans? We asked about that last time. I do recall
forgot.
asking him to remove the third dock maybe 3 years ago,
Okay.
and it was determined that it wasn't authorized. And so I would like to see, if that's true, I'd like to see it removed from the plans.
All right.
I'll bring that up to him and let him
I'll
know.
look into it too. I made a
Yeah,
note, so.
I'm pretty sure that was an issue that came up, and that third float wasn't permitted, so it was removed. And next, the elevation data for your mean high water mark, is that a recent data point? Where does that come from?
That comes from the Army Corps of Engineer Tidal Flood Survey from 1988.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily recent, but any of the tidal data from NOAA or from anybody else, I think NOAA right now is 1983 to 2001 is the
Right.
tidal epoch that they show for their tidal datums.
Yeah.
So none of it's really recent, and I actually think that the NOAA tidal epoch is going to be updating in the next year or so.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm sure it's definitely changed. When I was out there today, the actual mean high water might be more.
It's further up the bank, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it'll have to be field located and gone over with the dredge and contractor prior.
That's my question. Will we
we
lock
have
in
to
on this
do.
elevation in the plans, or will it be adjusted? I think we should permit it for a specific elevation.
We're just gonna say it has to be above mean high water. I wouldn't even assign it an elevation necessarily in the orders.
See, the reason I'm
During the
expressing
site,
concern
yeah.
is because you've got the Stony Flats quahog bed right there.
Right.
It's a real productive quahog bed. Lots of people, not lots of people, but people do shellfish there. It's a site where you want to be precautionary towards over nourishing into
Yeah.
the beyond mean high water.
Right.
So I'd like to have some precautions in the order that either lock in on an elevation or maybe have some type of, compliance checking that we can make sure that doesn't happen.
Something that we've seen before is we field locate during the on-site meeting, pre-construction meeting. Within a couple of feet, you can pretty much locate where the mean high water is. So
Isn't
it
that
may-
hard because the conditions change?
We always err on
Or
the
if you
side
do
of
it on a
caution
full
and put it
moon or-
farther. We always
Yeah,
put it farther landward than probably really needs to be.
because the mean
They
is
could
the
stake
mean.
it.
It's a true average where you go out there, you're gonna see all kinds of variation to what you see
Right.
on site. So
Lucky on the sound, it's not quite as bad as like Cape Cod Bay.
Sure,
So,
but I think it's creeping upward at this
Yeah.
location, and so
yeah. I would
I guess
agree.
if we can just find some way to put language in the order that expresses a concern that we really document that we don't overnourish at this location.
And the draft plan that Amy has there, I know it's not official right now, but the way the 1-on-8 slope kind of fit onto the existing profile. It actually comes up from the beach. If you kind of look at it now, the beach slopes up from mean high water, and there's a very brief berm before the dune.
Right.
So it'd basically be taking that slope that's already there and just extending it up to the dune.
Yeah,
So it would be well above mean high water. And
right. Okay, that sounds good. And I guess my last comment, I know we talked about shellfish on that perimeter near the navigation channel. Are we doing anything about that? Are we removing them? Are we going to, keep an eye on the dewatering area to see what comes up? Or anything we're doing there?
Hopefully it won't need to be dewatered on the site. It'll just be pumped
Right.
on here. If it needs to get dewatered, we can certainly look at that. This was, so the two projects we had for dock or dredging stuff, but we didn't dredge at Turner on Strandway. That location, I said we should leave the shellfish. Here, I don't see I think it's okay if we would let Heinz have people shellfish that, because it's just gonna get wasted. It's more of a recent accumulation. I would let them harvest it.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know what's there. We know the sand is building up, and so we don't.
Soft shells, probably,
Well,
maybe, no?
I think it's too transient for soft shells.
Really?
In the middle of the channel, there's going to be cohogs.
Yeah.
People can fish on the other side, but there's not very good access to this location to get in that deeper water. So I just like something in the order. What can happen sometimes at Red River, we've seen the dredge spoils accumulated. We'll see, a bunch of dead
Right.
clams in that spoil. Is there any way to either retrieve them at that point or to dig them out earlier? What's the preferred approach?
I mean, I don't know if we can, after the fact, go in there and get them out, or
It's not
we haven't
that,
really made anybody do that.
it's not that efficient to have
Right.
someone watch.
I would just,
But if it's
Have
200
Heinz.
cohogs baking in the sun, then it won't look good, and it won't be. it'll be a
no,
lost
of
resource.
course not. I would just definitely tell Heinz that he can have the commercial guys or go and get them, or if Heinz wants to go get them.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we can mandate that the applicant, go and remove them and save
Well, if
them.
if it's an impact to the resource, I think
Yeah.
we can. If it's a dense cohog bed, we certainly can. I
maybe
guess,
We
I
don't
was
know
going to
what's
say
there.
prior to work, we could reach out to Amy and we could discuss that with Amy and Hines, and
yeah,
maybe at that point figure out what the best approach would be.
maybe coordinate with
Yeah.
Amy and Hines.
Yeah, I'm not the shellfish constable, so
Right. Coordinate with Hines pre-construction to either remove what's there or have some type of process to inspect, the spoil deposition.
Right.
We call it spoil anymore? Or
Dredge spoils, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
And just to make sure we don't have hit a real big high density of clams that, could be gathered. Some type of contingency plan.
yeah. Maybe
Okay.
we can go out there and just have Heinz poke around. I'll go out too. It'd be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I'll go. I can use some clams.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
I think there'll be something where it gets deep right at that edge.
Yeah.
And so, if there happened to be a set that was a high density, you'd hate to see,
Yeah.
a real large number taken out, but we don't know.
We don't know.
We don't
And
have
it has been dredged before, but not for a while, not for about 8 years. So,
Yep. Any thoughts on that from other commission members? It doesn't come up that often.
Yeah, it'd be nice to get them removed one way or the other if someone was willing to do some bull raking or.
I prefer to have them taken and planted someplace else.
Yeah.
But then how do you get the labor to do that? Because the commercial fishermen, they need to be compensated for their labor.
yeah.
So I guess coordinate with the shellfish officer and see what happens. And maybe inform the commission. I live real close. I'd love to come down and just see the
What's there?
movement of sediments and just see what's happening.
Sure.
And just see if it's an issue or not.
Yep.
It'd be fun to see that, just to see the operation. Okay, so we've got a couple conditions.
I'll draft the conditions for you anyways. You'll get
Okay.
to see them next time.
Yep. And I guess maybe proactively, I'd like to see the final approved plans, not have that third dock if in fact it shouldn't be
Yeah,
there.
I will check that tomorrow.
Okay.
Sorry, it just fell off my radar.
It's a minor thing, but someday it's all new
Well-
property owners and new commission members, and all of a
But
sudden
it
there's
was
a
a big
third dock.
deal. We spent a lot of time on that, so.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the notice of intent for 6 Saquatucket Point maintenance, dredging, and beach nourishment.
We have a second from Mark. Any discussion? Amy has the conditions. All those in favor say aye. Aye. None opposed? Motion
Thank you very much.
So I'll draft the orders and we'll vote on them next time. It's not something you typically need to be here for. I can share them, the draft with you ahead of time.
That's great, thank you.
You can take this back, thank you. Just need a hard- yeah. There is a sign-in sheet on the back, if any, I forgot to mention it earlier, probably missed a few people. It's on that back chair there, if people don't mind. Thank you.
I was thinking that we had talked about the shellfish being pulled out of here, but that was some of the other ones that were.
We talked about it a little bit. We did, and I don't think we concluded what we were going to do there. I think we typically defer to Heinz Prof to see what he thinks.
Yeah, I'll work with Heinz,
Yeah.
and if he thinks that there's, maybe it'd be fairly easy to kind of get a rough idea, is there enough density out there to be concerned? And
Yeah.
get rid of them.
Commercial, there's like 2 or 3 commercial fishermen will go there in the winter.
Yeah.
And they'll bull rake right along that main deep channel, and,
Well, if we can't move them, that's the next, at least somebody can use them.
yeah, yep.
Hate to see them, rotting on the beach, so.
Yeah, and if there's 6, then that's the way it goes.
Right.
But if there's, 600, then we should do
Right.
something about it.
Yep,
Next, we have a notice of intent for a King property at 30 Lopworth Avenue, construction of a wooden deck at the back of the house and minor alterations to eliminate water from entering the basement. They have requested a continuance.
yes, they have, there's an ill family member.
Okay.
They were fully prepared to come tonight.
Okay.
I did tell them, if you have any new information, we really need it ahead of time, because I haven't gotten anything, even if they were to come tonight. So they've asked for November 7th, and I would like them to get information the week ahead of time.
Yeah. Well, I move that we continue that hearing till November 7th.
Second.
How long can we continue these?
Quite a while now. It is, the continuations for this hearing are a bit of a result of the ongoing litigation. But we've given, without getting too much into litigation, so we're not in executive session, it's been probably 2 months since we gave them our last proposal for settlement, for them to digest. It is, but it's separate but related. We can go into that. That might have been when discussion of that might have been when you weren't here. I'm happy to discuss it with you. So, but I do, November 7th, we need something about an update on this.
Okay, so got a second from Stan. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries.
Even if it's an executive session that we have on that date for updates, we need something in these projects.
Yep. Okay, next we have a continuance on the notice of intent for the Facey property, 8 Whippoorwill Lane, installation of a seasonal floating pier and dock in Bucks Pond.
How are y'all?
Good, thanks.
I just have some additional documentation that came in after Friday's deadline. Just hand that out. Amy, does everybody have the sketch?
We should have this schedule
Do you have extra copy?
of the sketch.
Yeah.
I have a copy in case you don't.
Okay. Not finding it. It's probably here, but I
Kind
don't
of
find it.
picture, but.
It may have been in the original
Yeah,
filing.
that's what I'm looking at.
Sorry. Sometimes we don't.
Sorry, I have another copy.
Okay, so this is a continuance.
Okay, I found it.
You have it?
Yep, I got it.
Anybody else need one? I
Nope.
do have extras in the
No
file.
changes.
Okay. No, this was just continued so we could go to waterways and whatnot, so. We're good.
Is that the one that Waterways signed?
I have that one, the original.
Okay.
It's the same,
Yep, it's the same. Okay. So thanks for your time. Since the hearing on August 15th, I sat before the Waterways Committee on the September 19th, and they signed off on it. The concerns, I believe, that you had on the 15th was a butter support, chiefly the Great Sand Lakes Association, of which I'm a member. So I asked to have this hearing tonight because I was waiting for the next board meeting, which they had on Friday the 12th, just last week. So there was an issue that had come up as a result of the Moran Engineering survey that, with, as far as where the property line was, which you can see on the sketch. So the association and I worked on a kind of a compromise plan, and as a result of that, they voted on Friday to not oppose the 10-foot buffer that you see on the sketch. Also, since August, I've done the Massachusetts Chapter 91 license application. It was publicized September 5th and October 5th. After October 5th, I spoke with Dave Hill at the Lakeville location of MassDep, and he sees no issue or problem at this point. Says they're backlogged, but sees, in a month, 2 months, 3 months, they'll be able to issue the Chapter 91. So at this point, I'm hoping that you can consider approval. We got, we went through Massachusetts Endangered Species Act. Both Bucks and John Joseph Ponds are priority habitats. They issued a letter back in August saying that they had no issue with the project for the dock. My 4 chief abutting residential neighbors have all issued letters in support, which the commission has in hand, and now the closest abutter, being the association itself, has said they don't oppose it.
Any comments, Amy?
Sure. In regards to the dock itself, the dock meets all the Conservation Commission's performance standards for docks on freshwater ponds. It is less than 80 feet in length. It has at least 2.5 feet at the float. The float, if you will, which is the floating dock, is less than 200 square feet because it's 10 by 15. The rest of it is, the pier itself is less than or no greater than 4 feet wide. It would be seasonal, seasonal dock that would come out, and we'd have to have it stored. It'd have to be stored upland near the house in the off season. So it is very close to the bordering vegetative wetland, and it says edge of brush on plan. And we just want to make sure, no pruning is currently proposed in order to put that dock in, and that wouldn't be permitted under this. It's not being asked for at this time. And the only thing, it meets our 65 feet from adjacent structures. The regulation about being 25 feet off the property line is a state condition, and that's what you'll have to get the variance for, to only be 10 feet. It's pretty common that they do issue those, but that's not our purview. So the 10-foot variance you were talking about, essentially, or buffer, is a state requirement, not ours. Both Waterways, as well as the Harbor Master and Natural Resources Director, didn't oppose this project as presented. We do have that plan from them. I didn't see the minutes posted just yet, but I did have a chance to speak with them, and they had no opposition to it. In regards to some of the upland activities, I would recommend that the commission that the fence that is currently on the Great Sand Lakes Association property, that's been used by, previous owners, mostly, of 8 Whippoorwill Lane, that fence has to be moved to the property line of 8 Whippoorwill. I don't know if I don't know how long that fence has been there. I know it's before you, but there is a little question about whether that fence was ever permitted to begin with, so.
I'm pretty sure it was not.
Yeah.
One of the things I handed out was, I tracked down the daughter of the Ostlers who owned the house from roughly early 70s to 2010.
Yeah.
So she remembers the fence being there, in the 70s. At the time, it was post and rail all the way from 100 feet away from the water line all the way down. And then the Cohens, who bought it in 2010, used chain link fence, except for the last 20 feet. And so that was part of the agreement with the association, actually, was not even to move it, I'm just going to take it down.
Oh, okay. That makes our life easier.
I'm taking it down just, yeah, and you'll see that in the letter from Jim Robichaud, who's the GSLA president.
Okay,
So I'm planning on doing that in the next 2-3 weeks.
great. To make you aware, so we have a regulation that stipulates that there's to be no new structures within 60 feet of a wetland resource area. So that's why I bring this up, because part of that fence definitely is within that, and certainly within the 100. So the removal of that, would you be looking to replace anything, like split rail?
No.
We'd consider fence structure, just so you know, in
Sure.
the future. So taking it out is great. That solves one of my questions about whether or not it should even be there. And then the other portion, there is a, it looks like it's been there a little while, the existing low tie wall that also extends onto Great Sand Lakes Association property. Was there discussion about removal of that or leaving it?
There was no discussion of removing it. The LaRoses, Joe, who was here in support back on August 15th, keep copious records of photographs. So
Good.
you have
Yes.
photographs there from 1989 and
It's been there a
1998.
while. Yeah.
That timber wall's been there. And while I understand the concerns for it, I think it's clear that at least for 30 years,
Yep.
it's actually been holding up vegetation and preventing erosion. One of the pictures there, I forget which one, you can see how much lower the lake was in the 80s, 90s. I remember that when I was a kid. So obviously the water level in the local ponds is a lot higher than it was at times.
We appreciate the photo documentation. It really helps, actually. We've seen a lot of this kind of encroachment onto other properties lately, and to have photo documentation of things is with actual
Yeah, she
dates
said the
is
aerial,
good.
the aerial one was apparently for her son's high school project or something.
Okay. The low wall is relatively benign. I don't see any negative impact of letting it stay, and just when it becomes past its useful life, it's not, you either have to come back for replacement to the Conservation Commission or removal. But I like where, I really like where this is going. I would encourage, and we'll probably put in the conditions, that the strip of land kind of, that where the fence is now, that is kind of become lawn, yard area, that is to be replanted with native plantings. And I'll give you guidance as far as what that should be, but it's really gonna, technically it would go to the Great Sand Lakes Association because it's their property, but they'd have to work, they would work with you, I'm assuming, to accomplish that, so. With those things being said, and our typical conditions for the dock, for dock projects on ponds, I would recommend approval.
Thank you. Want to start, Ernie?
Questions?
Okay, Mark?
No questions.
Jim?
What's the plan for like the area right along the water between the dock and the association property? Is that,
There's no plan to alter it.
is it currently beach, essentially?
Yeah, it's a sandy with some pine needles currently.
Right. And then on the other side of the proposed dock is wetland vegetation, essentially.
The bordering
Yes, and
vegetative
that,
wetland, yeah.
yeah, we have absolutely no plans to prune or
Okay.
modify that because it actually creates the privacy that we like about the property.
Yeah. And you're suggesting planting on the other side of that property line, Amy?
Basically between, it's about basically between, like, where the dock was, but, so where the fence is now, up to Mr. Facey's property line, it's probably about a 15-ish foot wide swath there, planting, this area up with, appropriate native shrub species, certain, I can give examples of types and sizes and all that stuff. I don't think we need a planting plan, like a real official planting plan for that area. A sketch plan would be okay with me. But.
Okay.
The only thing I'm looking at is the GLSA letter here where you had mentioned you're removing the fence, and they were talking about possibly putting in 32 feet of split rail fence, which would be their project, not yours. And then later down on what they've approved, they have the right to, or reserve the right to install fence on their property.
They
And
are
that would
aware
be
that
up
they
to-
have to
and
go
that
to the
would be their
Conservation
issue,
Commission to
right,
do
not
that.
yours.
Yep.
But I'm just pointing that out on that, because we're talking about
Yep.
plantings within, I don't know what area where that fence is, you know, but again, that's not the point.
It basically
of
would
this.
be a fence whose, with the purpose of simply identifying.
Identify a
the
property line, right,
Yeah.
right, but it would have to be.
Yep, and I've spoken with the Grace Sand Lakes Association, and they've been to us various times.
Right.
They're aware that any activity within the buffer's got to come to conservation. So.
Okay, that's all.
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Amy, what was the status of the fine that was issued? Was that actually?
paid.
It was paid, so that's all set, okay. All right, I think we can entertain a motion then.
I'll make a motion to approve the proposed
We're not
seasonal
in
floating
yet.
pier on Bucks Pond at 8 Whippoorwill Lane.
Second.
Second by Stan, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
None opposed? Motion carries.
And he's abstaining because he wasn't a
Abstaining,
full
right.
commissioner at the time.
Okay.
You're approved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So what our next practice is at our next meeting, you do not need to attend unless you absolutely find us riveting.
Well, I do find you riveting, for sure.
So from now, I will draft the conditions. The commission will hopefully sign the conditions at the next meeting and then we'll provide those to DEP, which should hopefully help in your process for chapter 91. Okay?
All right, thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, ready?
Yep, you gotta formally vote on this one.
Oh, that's right.
For withdrawal, just so you
Yep.
know.
The next is a notice of intent for the Tingsley property at 53 Strandway, raise an existing dwelling and construct a new dwelling with pool and new septic. We received a notification to withdraw without prejudice,
Correct.
and so I would like to motion that we accept that. Anything else we have to say about that?
Why don't you get a second, and then I'll just.
Second it? Okay, Stan, second it.
Alright. So, we're gonna discuss this later in enforcement.
Mhm.
Interestingly, I told them they can go home for a little while when they were sitting here. They found evidence that the wall's been there since the early 70s. So we'll discuss that under discussion, but
Mhm.
interesting.
Yeah,
So, I recommend they withdraw without prejudice.
okay. All those in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye. Abstaining?
Yeah, I think I need to abstain.
Okay.
On River Pine, I think they're out. They don't know that they're up yet. Boy doesn't know.
Who's that?
It's gonna be 11 River Pine.
Isn't it Sequatum?
Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Am I off? I'm sorry.
85 Sequatum.
Oh, I apologize. I'm so sorry. I have a different order.
right by it.
No, I'm so sorry. I apologize.
Next, we have a notice of intent
Wrong
for
order
the
between
bio
agendas.
property, 85 Sequatum Road, bulkhead, boathouse, reconstruction, dock construction, access path, stair relocation, tree cutting, and site restoration.
I'm sorry. No, this side. I should Thought I reordered everything correctly, but I didn't.
Good evening, Dan Crota from Moran Engineering, here with Mark Burgess from Shorefront Consulting, the owner, Rick Veo, and Emma, not her last name, from who we asked to draw, Rick had asked to draw a landscaping plan for the project that's being proposed. So Rick has bought, I believe it's 7 lots, including this on-front area. And myself and Rick had been here before for the main building, removing 89 and putting in work for his main building. This is for the 85, removing 85, and then working on the waterfront area. The waterfront area, which is 3 lots, he's looking at using the middle lot. The waterfront area, which had been heavily used in the past, in the most recent couple of years, hasn't been used to much of an extent, even though the existing property is 3 rental houses. But over the last few winters, the bulkhead has been hit by the storms and fallen apart, and the sand has been eroded. So Rick's looking at putting in so this area that hasn't been heavily used by a family in the last couple of years, which there are pictures Mark had given that show that it was, at one point, was basically a lawn. Rick's family is going to use this property down on the waterfront. He's sold his house maybe 10 properties down, and then is moving to this house. And so this waterfront area, which hadn't been used much, will now be used. So Rick's trying to come up with the most concise area to keep the use in. And the proposal here is to take the boathouse, lift the boathouse, add a deck area to keep people off of the to keep people on that deck, bring the bulkhead in the same amount that he was knowing that he needed the variance for this deck, bringing the bulkhead in that same size of the deck, which had in the past been lawn, bringing that in. The deck, the BVW, as Emma has delineated, it's sparse, but because it hasn't been walked on in quite a while, the few plants that have come up, they are wetland plants, or majority wetland plants. So the BVW line comes almost comes right into the stairs itself. Again, probably a factor, well, definitely a factor of the erosion and of the lack of use of the area. But anyways, some of the deck would go over what is currently BVW, and so he's looking to offset that by putting a BVW in an area that won't be walked on and separating that with a line of stones. I will ask Mark to go into, I originally was just going to do what was roadside and up, but I think I went further than I was planning. I'll ask Mark to go over the waterfront stuff and maybe what the quickly what it would take to permit the waterfront part.
Okay. Yeah, for the record, Mark Burgess, Shoreford Consulting. We're gonna flip here. So the other part of the project is to take the entire dwelling down at 85, is that right? At 85. So there's an existing dwelling there now, and that dwelling's being completely removed with no replacement intended. And then on the bank slope, there's 12 pine trees that are proposed to be flush cut to protect the bank. Emma can go into more detail with that. Some of the trees are definitely damaged, some of them are dying, some of them are full of pine cones, you know what that means. The rest of them, it's more preventative because they're all on the slope. So they would be flush cut, and Emma, again, will go through detail with the planting restoration portion of the project. So as Dan said, this bulkhead that used to be there, the remains that are still out there, it used to be there prior to 1978. We have, I can submit these for the record, but we have 3 letters from the neighbors that attest that the bulkhead in that area was there approximately 1968, 1969, and another person when they were in high school in 1972. And that's the gist of the 3 letters. There were people who grew up there that played in the area. And I gave you a copy of the 1971 aerial that you can kind of see an outline. The detail's not as good. And then the applicant provided you with several pictures that clearly shows what used to be out there before these high waters in Long Pond just wiped that shoreline out for many projects that have been before you this year. So this project, what I'd like to concisely limit it, I would say that this is a balance between what used to be there. So remember, what used to be there was a solid filled bulkhead 6 feet further out in the, well, where it is now, but we're going to move it back 6 feet. And it was all fill and all lawn. We don't want to put, the applicant doesn't want to put all that back. Since the bulkhead got destroyed and since there's been erosion, BVW has crept onto the property. That BVW is going to be increased and maintained. And the idea, the principle also is to consolidate the use of those waterfront lots to one area. So not everybody's going to be roaming all over it anymore. The purpose of the deck and the landing from the boathouse is access and recreation concentrated in that area. So all of the area to the east of the existing staircase won't be used. So the other elements, the staircase, they want to relocate the staircase to where the new landing would be in front of the boathouse, which makes sense because that's where you're going to land onto the deck and do your thing. The other part of the proposal is a ramp that is cut into the hillside. So there's no fill. It'll be cut and graded and then replanted. The purpose of the ramp, if you will, is to provide somewhat handicap access. Rick has elderly in-laws that really can't negotiate stairs, and he has a couple of elderly rescue dogs that also can't negotiate stairs. He has to carry them up and down the stairs if they're going to go down to the waterfront. It also provides a place to wheel a cart, and get things safely down to the waterfront, whether it's life jackets and paddles or a cooler or whatever. But again, it concentrates the use from the staircase to the west, and nothing to the east of the staircase would be used. Let's see.
I think that Rick
And
would,
I think that's the gist of it. The deck, the proposed deck and landing is over 130 square feet of BVW and 180 square feet of BVW is proposed on the east side, the new plantings. So for the waterfront work, that's kind of the synopsis. It's a concentrated use. They're not going to put back as much as what used to be there. And I would look at this as a balance between those items of the use of the site. We do have a file number. Division Marine Fisheries suggested a time of year restriction, no work from April 1 to June 30th. And we did file for MESA, but we have not heard from them, so we will have another crack at this later on. That's that's it for me. I think Rick wants to speak, and then we'll have Emma come in with the planting and all of that.
Let me just, one more thing I'd like to bring up that was in a note was, anybody that visited the site, what you can't tell this time of year is summer boat traffic, when there's 2-foot wakes coming in and you can't tell the winter storms, and you can't tell summer boat traffic. And I think Rick can go to the fact that if you're leaving your beach setup at current grade, boatways are coming right at you, correct? They are continually washing at you.
Good evening, Rick Veo for the record. So a few things, I guess I just wanted to backtrack a little bit. The picture I'm showing is the existing property. You have the main house, a garage, and 2 guest houses. If you recall, I came before the board a few months ago for the demolition of this house and this garage, and offering to move that back beyond the 100-foot, really for one reason and one reason only, because I thought it was the right thing to do. We now would like to take these structures, remove them, and if anything, at a later date, a guest house or some other accommodations were to be built, it would be back beyond the 100 as well. This piece that we're removing alone is about 3,000 square feet within the 100-foot. So now I'm going to back up even a little bit further. So we lived at 51 Sequatum for 12 years, vacation down on and around Sequatum for the last 20. So we've had have a lot of experience on the pond. We saw this property hit the market, or was about to hit the market, and then it did hit the market, and we discussed with the owners, the idea of selling it many, many times. They wanted a large number for the property because of the potential. You had 3 existing dwellings and potentially 3 more lots. These dwellings were all used as vacation rentals. You frequently had a total of 16 to 20 people staying in here, absolutely obliterating the waterfront every season. The idea of me living a few houses down and watching this go on in this pristine setting was just horrific. And I thought, okay, so we have 3 more coming. This is only going to get worse. What can we do? We started to negotiate and struck a deal because he, in fact, liked the idea of limiting it to 1 family area, but had a lot of sisters and brothers, and everyone wants a piece of the pie. And so we finally settled on something. So the intent here, from my perspective, is to create, going back to this wooded area, a new house here, a potential guest house here, and then that's it. The rest of this remains untouched. And we would be eliminating in this proposal, these lots would all become 1, so they can never be broken up again. This would be eventually an 81X, including the 6th Street that's been decommissioned. So this would be a lot, this would be a lot. So the next board, you see ultimately what it becomes and what we're trying to eliminate the potential of, 6 rental properties on the property, all with access to the water, all storing kayaks and, craziness all across the waterfront. So a couple of misstatements from earlier, and that is that this was heavily used up until this summer. We had it under agreement prior to the summer, and one of my stipulations was that they wouldn't rent it out because I didn't want it to get any worse. I could see from the past January that the wall was coming down, the waves were coming in, things were getting obliterated even further. I said, I don't want to see more renters, so we'll put it under agreement. We negotiated a fee for what I would have to pay to have them not rented out while we waited to come through this process. So the only reason it hasn't been used this summer was because I kind of paid to not have it used, is what it boils down to. Prior to that, again, 16, 20 people constantly down there. You can see, can I just have that stack of papers underneath my phone and wallet right there? So you can see from this picture, which is a pretty recent picture, I only have one, I apologize. You can pass it around and see where the bulkhead was there, all lawn behind it. the shed, et cetera, et cetera. And that was, I think, 2 years ago. Now you go down there, as I'm sure you've all been there, there's virtually nothing left. All of that happened as of the January, February storms. There was a full bulkhead as of January 1, 2018. We're still picking up pieces of it all the way down as far back as 2nd Street from that storm, from the the northeast waves hitting it and dragging it down. So again, the intention is to consolidate this, make this a limited use. We were trying to come in with a proposal that gave up a great deal of structure in the 100-foot setback, and we were hoping to give up about 6 to 8 feet of bulkhead area, pull that in, and replace that with a deck. We learned at our other house at 51 Sequatum, and the Conservation Commission at the time approved it, and we learned very quickly that if you create that structure and you create that landing for people, that's where people will congregate. And if you don't, they just migrate all over the beach. And I think, Amy, you've been down to my house and waterfront at 51. I think we did a very good job doing that. It worked very well. It kept people contained, and that's what we're trying to do here. Rebuilding the shed and its existing footprint, but up, creating that deck as a landing spot, the stairs coming right onto it, maintaining some beach, and then letting the rest go back to natural on both sides of that shed. The only other thing that we're hoping for, and I guess I'll, lack of a better way of putting it, I'll give my sob story about that, and that is the ramp. We know we would never propose a wooden structure. I understand why that doesn't make a lot of sense for the board and whatnot. The ramp is very important to me. I had 2 elderly parents a few years ago. One passed away expectedly. The next one passed away very unexpectedly. 3 to 4 years prior to that, they couldn't use the waterfront at 51 Sequatum at all. It was very disappointing. They had for years. I now have 2 aging in-laws that one handicapped, one not, but will be in the same potential situation. And it's very frustrating to get to a point where they can't get down to the waterfront. Someone suggests you can do the electric chair. A lot of people don't want to use that. It's tough. Plus, we do a lot with rescue animals, so we end up at 51 Sequatum. I would carry them down to the waterfront every time for an 85 to 100-pound dog. It became very dangerous, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea of the ramp, the way I was looking at it is right now you had the potential of 3 waterfront access points. If this got developed as it was proposed to, these could have been divided and you could have ended up with easily 6 waterfront access points. I would be limiting it still to 3. The one existing staircase down here, which is sort of just a rudimentary staircase, the one staircase we're moving, and then the natural ramp, which we discussed this a little bit with Amy, and the idea of cutting it into the slope as opposed to filling or whatnot. So that's kind of where we ended up with the proposal you see in front of you. I felt like we were trying to do a reasonable sort of trade-off, if you will, of taking structures out of the 100-foot and even the 50-foot in some cases, and then replacing on a limited basis. So I don't know if you want to shoot down here. I'll jump over there. You can jump over.
For the record, Emma Vautour with Blue Flax Design. So on this site, we have a mix of native and non-native vegetation. There's actually a fair amount of healthy native vegetation on the slope that can be preserved, and a diverse community of native species that can be built upon when we're doing our management. So there are a few areas, several areas where invasive species, including shrub honeysuckle, bittersweet, and English ivy, have become, they've started to take over and outcompete the native species there. And we're proposing to manage these with a selective EPA approved herbicide and hand removal, and then follow-up maintenance for the next 3 years to ensure that they're successfully removed from that area. We've shaded the densest areas of invasive species existing in blue, but I just want to clarify that we will be managing all invasive species within the project area. And then any voids created by removing the invasive species will be replanted with native shrubs, including bayberry, summer sweet clethra, and arrowwood viburnum. And there's also plenty of room for improvement along the roadside to minimize stormwater runoff shedding from the upland portions of the site. So really capturing the runoff from especially the road before it reaches the resource area and the slope. So currently along the roadside here, there's a strip of grass that's being maintained and mowed regularly as lawn, and it extends right up to the edge of slope. So what we're proposing is to expand the vegetative buffer in approximately 1,500 square feet of new planting. And that'll be a mix of native shrubs, including high bush blueberry, black chokeberry, and sweet fern. And then we would also seed that area with a custom mix of native grasses and wildflowers. And then closest to the water, this area shaded in green, will be 180 square feet that we're proposing to restore to wetland. It's within the resource area, but currently it's a very sparse amount of vegetation, and that previously was not maintained as BVW. It was previously lawn. So we're proposing to seed that with a wetland mix of sedges and forbs, and plant it with buttonbush, which is a native wetland edge shrub. And where the access path is cut into the slope, so just south of that, the upland side, we're proposing to regrade that to create a stable angle of repose, and then we'll stabilize the slope with 100% biodegradable coconut fiber erosion control blankets. Seed it with grass and wildflower mix, and then plant it also, again, with a mix of native shrubs, bayberry and viburnum. And then all upland areas where structures are being removed, so the house on the upland portion will be seeded with a fescue lawn mix. We're also proposing 11 mature pitch pine trees that are nearing the end of their life cycle are to be removed from the slope. And so 2 of those are along the proposed access ramp. And so pitch pines are generally in decline across Cape Cod, and these ones are coming close to the end of their life cycle, and so we're just proposing that that they come down, and we will be replanting 3 understory trees, including several serviceberry. And then so overall, we're providing approximately 1,500 square feet of new planting, as well as the restoration, invasive species management on the bank. And there's one typographical error that I want to point out on your plans. It says there will be a total of 28 shrubs planted. There will actually be a total of 100 native plants and 3 understory trees planted. So I'm happy to take any questions that you have about the mitigation provided.
Thank you. Amy, do you want to go through a summary for us, please?
Sure. Give me 1 second here. Okay.
There's a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. So I think what I did in my site summary, I think I'm gonna kind of break it up and do it kind of piece by piece, and then we can talk about it as a whole. So I'll go with the easier parts first, and the first would be the replacement of the existing boathouse with the same size on sonotubes. So it's going to be about what, 1.5 feet higher? I can't remember off the top of my
It's
head.
on the ground now, so
Right.
about 1.5 to 2 feet high.
1.5 to 2 feet higher. I have no issue with that. It's a simple kind of in-kind replacement. We did meet out on site when this was in its conceptual stages, and we had a conversation, about limit of bordering vegetated wetlands. So I do appreciate going back and field locating that, and it is kind of what we thought it was going to be on site. So let's see. Let's go to the stairs next. There's an existing set of stairs which is kind of shaded out in the plan. I appreciate what you want to do in kind of consolidating activity on your sites. So there's a set of stairs that goes close to the boathouse, so we connect with the proposed deck. In addition, they did request a ramp. I understand why. We have to kind of look at our regulations and see if that does or doesn't fit in with the regulations. On one particular property, I understand that you're not building out the rest of the neighborhood or the surrounding area, but on one property, I don't know, it's very rare if we have, if ever, granted more than one access down to the water main access way. So I would encourage, our regulations read you can have a 4-foot wide access down to the water. So I would recommend going with one over the other. And in terms of, I went today again and saw the slope, and I'd like to, if you were to pick the ramp option, would it be better for that slope to do a raised, something a little bit off the ground, so it would be less destabilization of the actual slope itself? And maybe to get people down towards the boathouse, which is where you want to concentrate activity, maybe you start that ramp on the other side and go down. Just since we have to come back anyway, I'm just thinking aloud here. In my professional opinion, by reading our regs, we really allow one main access point. So understand the constraints in family, but we have to go by our regs. So, okay. So the bordering, one question I do have, and it might be for Dan or something. Did you field locate, when did you field locate natural high water?
Natural high water. That was from multiple projects. I mean,
Okay.
fit for natural high,
Yeah.
natural low.
It is very clear that it is much landward of the old wall that's out there. So you will be, as proposed, you will be going for a Chapter 91 license for the new one, because it is, the new bulkhead is still proposed out below mean high water, which would mean you would have to fill. I understand that it's because this area hasn't been used that it's starting to revert quite quickly back to a natural state. And thank you for the photos. It does help see what was there not too long ago. So I do think there is some grandfathering here, but we just have to kind of determine, in my mind, like the new wall, should it still be out within below mean high water? Should it be at mean high water? Is it, I guess, one of the questions I think in the fields we talked about too is the necessity of a wall. You're saying the wall that was there was structurally intact as of a year ago or so. And now it's really, almost gone for most intents and purposes. All right, sorry, I got a little sidetracked. In terms of the deck, it's a little unusual to ask for a new, we talked about this on site, the deck, a new deck structure right at the edge of the water there. Typically we look at like little landings as people get onto docks. It's a little unusual. So part of it is within the bordering vegetated wetland performance standards, and it's a bordering vegetated wetland that's just starting to naturalize or get grasses and forbs that are coming in that are wetland vegetation. So it is a bordering vegetated wetland. It has the predominance of wetland vegetation, but it's not not that it makes much of a difference for the definition, but it's not large shrubs and trees. It is the start of a bordering vegetative wetland where there wasn't one, allowed to be one before. So you have the hydric soils and you have the vegetation coming in. They are proposing to put a 400 square foot deck over part of the BVW. The performance standards for bordering vegetative wetland is that you shouldn't destroy any portion of it, or if you are to destroy any portion of it, you have to replace it, which is what they are proposing to do on the eastern side of their property. It is difficult to replace wetland, but when you have, you're replacing kind of a very degraded wetland in one location with another, kind of equals to me. Sorry, there's just so much different aspects of this project. I feel like I'm jumping around so much. Huh? Yeah, I get that. We did talk, Mr. Veo, Dan and I did talk on site about the trees. A lot of the pitch pines are diseased. A lot of them are hazards. When they do come down, they take lots of portions of bank with them, and these are getting towards the end of their life. I would like to see potentially, though, and maybe the commission feels differently, you are replacing with 3 understory trees. In areas where it's not going to impact really view or anything else like that, I'd like to see maybe a couple more understory trees there as a replacement for the amount of trees that are coming up. I might just stop there for now and let everybody else talk, and then I'll come back to me.
Can I comment on a couple of things? So, the trees, one of my main reasons on the trees is they're not all at their exact life expectancy. I don't think they're all coming down tomorrow.
No.
But what I fear is many of them could come down tomorrow, and the other ones will come down within the next 5-6 years, depending on storms and whatnot. What I really don't want to see is we get all this replanted, it's all situated, and then I've got to bring a 40-ton crane in over the property, pull these trees out, because they will be down. And we saw that at 51 Sequatum, and I worked with Amy and John and whatnot to do that, and it worked quite well. In terms of the ramp, I do understand, I'm hoping for there's some leeway in the regulations because of there were 3 distinct parcels that potentially could have waterfront access. And again, those could have been broken up to allow all these lots to have waterfront access. And so I'm really not going beyond that 3 that would have been allowed in that case, or certainly more if people get broken up as they were proposing. So I certainly understand and appreciate that where you're coming from on that. I'm hoping there's some leniency, or looking at that picture where there were 3 lots there, and we're still only asking for 3 access points. We were trying to make that ramp as non-invasive as possible, and that's why we were proposing cutting in toward the back and replanting that. It would create a nice backdrop. It's more opportunity to do more native plantings, and I think the natural ramp, quite frankly, will look better from the waterfront if we can pull it off. And I'm pretty confident. I wasn't looking to make the perfect handicap ramp and slopes and whatnot. I was looking to just recreate something that was a little traversable, if that's a word. I'm not even sure that's a word. So that's I guess the only comments. And as far as the additional plantings, we have no problem, based on the board's recommendations. I would like to see this many more trees, or can we do them here, or whatnot. There's a large viewing area across this, and I think there's plenty of opportunities to put additional plants in that will look good, can be lived with.
Can I just make 1 or 2 follow-up quick things? Without there being like a restriction really on the other lots, there's no way for us to say down the road, if we let you have 2 access points on one lot here, without some sort of a restriction, there's really no way for us to preclude.
There would be a restriction because we're going to 81X So it eliminates the
Okay,
other lots.
all right. So that
it-
answers
it-
one
It would
thing.
know.
What does that mean?
So it means what we're
Consolidate.
doing is,
With the 81X?
yeah, so what happens is what you
Forgot
see
about that.
presently, right? All this potential for, all these various lots. Once we do the 81X, you basically have this as a house lot and this as a house lot. So there is no more possibility of additional houses being built there ever.
Right, could that be reversed, though?
No,
Future owner.
because those lots wouldn't conform. You
Right.
couldn't go back, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but once you have 81X, that all of those lines are gone. All these would be grandfathered lots. None of them are actually conforming lots. Once we 81X them, those lot lines are expunged, and you can't reverse that.
It's, 81X would be, is a plan showing the area of ownership, which Rick and his wife own all of that. There'd be one for done, where they're taking 6 and making 2 lots.
Yep.
There would be 2 81X plans. On the plan would say interior lot lines to be expunged. Whether it's that route or A&R to get rid of the lot lines, I guess that would.
Either way, once they're gone, you can't go back and reinitiate the grandfathering clause, which is the only reason.
Isn't there a variance process, though, in the future? If you would
Yes.
appeal to the planning board to...
That's not my
I
expertise,
my
so
understanding from.
it would be hard.
From
to
Ray, there's always anyone can go to split any lot,
Right.
but the odds of that happening, because they're completely non-conforming, if you were to go and, a conforming lot in this area is an acre. or
Is an acre. with the,
So you barely have enough for 2 lots here, let alone if someone were to come back and say, well, I just want to start dividing it up again. It would never be allowed, under any circumstances. It just,
It's a lot that happens.
So where these were divided back in the early 1900s, there really wasn't a requirement. Then it went up to 10,000 square feet. Rick's talking about right now the 6 lots, I believe, with the minimum 10,000 square feet. Once you put them together, anything is possible, of course, but generally the town zoning code is 40,000 square feet, so you have to create new lots.
it would be no more possible
So
than
it's
any
just-
other
it's
lot
just
on the
concrete
pond
as you can
being
get.
divided up. But that the zoning board of appeals just decides, we like you, we're gonna grant you this favor, so to speak. There'd be no real legal justification for it, in any way, shape, or form,
Well,
once they've been combined.
Plus the addition on at least 3 of the lots, I believe, the houses
Mhm.
crossing the lot lines.
Right, so you can see
Above control lots.
where the house is sitting, the new
The
house,
septic.
it actually crosses all the lot lines. So the house would have to be destroyed, then someone would have to apply for a variance to bring the property back to
Yeah.
early 1900 lot lines. So it would be quite a undertaking, I guess, to say
Yeah.
the least.
All right, thank you. Any more thoughts, Amy? Should go around the
I'm gonna
table.
pass for now.
Okay, let's go around the table. Ernie, any comments?
No, I'm just trying to absorb after this.
Yeah. It's you, Mark.
Couple things. The path cutting diagonally down the slope, to me, seems to be very problematic. I understand the reasoning for it. But without some pretty extensive work on both sides, upper and lower, it seems to me that's just going to be a continual chute for any water or anything to travel all the way down there and create a problem at the far end. That's kind of a big one to get by. And the bulkhead issue on the whole, when I look at the contour and I look at the shape of what was there back in this photo right here, if that's dated back to 1973, and you look at the shore to either end of the property, it's pretty clear to me that that bulkhead was put out in the water with the intent of building out. And at this moment, I'm not a believer that that's a necessity or should have been there to start with, or should be put back. I understand why you'd want it, but I'm not a particular supporter of that particular one. getting a foundation under the building and replacing the building that's existing, I don't have any problem with that. If it's up, if it's elevated, that's a healthy thing to do. But and the stairway coming down to it, to me, it would be very sensible to have multiple landings, even if it was switchbacked, to ease the process of coming and going. That's all I've got at the moment, but to me, they're all fairly significant.
Thanks, Mark. Jim, comments?
The ramp, I feel like if it is proposed, it should be a wooden structure. It just seems like it would be too hard to maintain that. I mean, I haven't seen good outcomes with that type of thing. And the bank is in great shape as it is. You know, it's vegetated, it's stable, there's no issues with it. So to really cut in seems like not a good idea. The photos are interesting. Like if you look at it today, it appears like there hasn't been a bulkhead there for, you know, it could be a decade or more. So that's, you know, we're just going on your word that that was from 9 months ago. I could see that being a possibility. But, you know, when you just look at it today, there's not really any erosion and there is not a bulkhead there. It's, you know, it's the pond and 3 sticks sticking out. But yeah, it's certainly possible that that was there. It does appear that there was no bulkhead, you know, on either side of this area. There's no erosion. It's very stable, basically because the vegetated wetland was allowed to regrow, which would be the ideal occurrence here from conservation purposes, but it's understandable. You have some other interest. The boathouse seems pretty straightforward. As far as the trees go, I would like to see some of the taller trees replaced with maybe not even understory trees, but trees that would actually, such as a maple, cherry, tupelo, or something, to actually, you know, replicate what was naturally there to some extent. I think that's all I got for now.
Yeah, I'm just looking at going back to Amy's comment, how we construct it, whether it be a path or a platform. If you had it going the other way, then you'd have your entrance to the boathouse as one. You wouldn't need the stairs then. So I don't know why we need both. The other thing, I think you made the comment that having the ramp go out there, or if you had the deck with the boathouse, that whole east side of the beach wasn't going to be used. Well, with having the ramp there, you're coming out in the east end of the beach, and you'd have to go over to where the deck is in the boathouse. So that kind of contradicts that aspect of it. We haven't even talked about building a deck, which is a new structure in the 50, which we say we're not going to allow. I mean, the boathouse is grandfathered. I mean, we're building it on the same footprint. That and the bulkhead, I'm not sure about. I guess that's the way I'm seeing it now. That's like at the water line right now. The proposed one would be at the
Past the water line.
or past the water line.
So the one, existing one is about 8 feet,
Oh, yeah, it's
10
in-
feet out into the water line, and you can see from some of the smaller pictures I passed around how, you know, far it was
Right.
out in the lawn. So
Yeah.
when that was destroyed in January, everything that was
Comes in.
behind there, the lawn, the grass, everything was just taken away. So now what we're proposing is to bring that in by about 8 feet, to close to the water line, and sort of give up that structure that was there.
I didn't think that was that far back today. I mean, when I looked at it, I didn't think it was 8 feet back. It was
Yeah.
maybe, was it?
Mm.
Okay.
if you look at the plan too, you can see, well, the edge of natural high water mark of the pond is probably about where it actually really is. And then you can see the old bulkhead, and then the darker gray line is the proposed. It's almost kind of in the middle between high water and then the old bulkhead, so it's kind of almost splitting the difference. But now, because that has, I would say that that's because it's been underwater, it's now, you'd be filling in land under water bodies to some extent, which is what your Chapter 91 license. So that's,
Yes, I'm not sure about that, but my biggest concern are, if we reverse the access the other way, we could combine 2 to 1 access points. And again, I don't see the deck. I mean, that's an entirely new structure there in the 50.
Our reasoning behind the deck was that the structure that we're removing and pulling in and eliminating that land, I mean, I understand that, we're saying, whether it's been commented that you potentially don't need that, but it has been a structure that, has existed since, somewhere between 1968 and 72 as usable structure and landmass down there, was destroyed within the last, within this calendar year. And so as opposed to leaving the wall way out there and recreating all of that land mass again, what we're proposing is to pull that in and basically replace that same square footage that we're eliminating with a deck to keep people from walking on just all over that area is really the philosophy behind it.
Oh, there was one other question. Where the stairs are currently, was there a dock out there too? Because there's parts of right on the.
Yeah, there were actually 2 licensed docks that went off the property.
But they're gone now. There's remnants of the.
There's remnants of everything up and
Right.
down the lake, and unfortunately, we didn't own it to be able to come before you sooner to get this replaced, and so, Mark will be permitting the replacement.
they were
docks.
licensed, but they they were older, they didn't have orders of conditions, to my knowledge, with the commission. They had licenses
So you're
with
going to put in
DEP.
docks also?
Right.
One, right? Or,
Right.
We
Yeah.
didn't talk about that. Where are those going?
it's not part of this proposal.
Well,
Yeah.
if we're talking about a deck, and if we got a dock, what do,
That'll,
that
this, the
could
evidence
impact
of this
my
would steer
thinking.
that proposal, I would think. Or the,
Yeah, depending on-
Well, if the deck's going where the existing remnants are today on the east end of the beach, then that's contradicting again what we're doing with the east end of the beach. So, I know it's not part of this proposal, but
The only reason we didn't dial in on where the dock would be because we didn't know how this
this is
might
gonna
morph.
shake out.
So I didn't,
Where are we going to end up with this?
The dock
And
could
when
fit
I said
anywhere
east,
here.
I meant east of the current staircase. So whereas any of the area that is east of the current staircase where the new
Oh.
BVW, east of that is not going to be used.
okay.
But from the staircase over, it'll be concentrated where the deck and the landing is by the boathouse.
That's not the way I was picturing
Okay,
that.
no, I meant, I'm sorry if I didn't, my wife tells me that all the time, and I don't, what I intend to say doesn't come out that way.
So really, from the stairs where they exist now, all the way over to the boathouse, you're gonna be existing beach or whatever.
There's some beach there,
Little area.
right, but the remainder of it that can be used now won't be. That's the point of
then
concentrating the
that-
area on the western side.
So then I guess I wonder what the purpose of the deck is if we've still got the beach there. But that's just my thinking right now.
So let me ask you this. I've always been torn between, in conservation, you conserve what is or what was. And it depends on which side of the table you're on as to what advantage that is. I'll give you an example, and Amy and I talked about this years ago. The town of Dennis took Crow's pasture that was going from a shrub to a forest. And they decided to turn it back into a meadow. So I'm not sure if we proposed that would ever fly, but the town did it because of conservation of a meadow. I get it. It's different habitat and all of that. So they conserved what used to be there and put it back. I think we could do that here because the bulkhead and the fill and the grass and everything was there prior to 1978, prior to the Wetlands Protection Act. And it's grandfathered as such. But we're not asking to put it all back, only some of it. And that's where the benefit comes from, that we're trying to balance between the use and the areas and things like that. So when you say that if we were to go for the whole grandfathering of this lot, someone could potentially ask for the bulkhead right back where it was, all of the fill and all of the grass, because there's pictures to prove that it was there. But that's not what the applicant wants. He wants a better balance of use with less area into the pond to conserve more space, reduce the amount of wetland area that's taken up, but compensating for it by concentrating their use on the left-hand side of the lot. That's where the balance comes in over what we could ask for versus what the applicant's asking for.
Well, right now, Mark, I'm thinking about the deck solely. When we're saying, well, the deck is going to minimize that use and degradation of that area, but not knowing about these other docks and still having that whole area from the stairs over to the boathouse, I don't see the difference.
Well, for me, if I was to speculate and say, if the deck went in and the landing goes out to the bulkhead like it does, obviously that's where we'd want to put the dock. And assuming that the grading is, I mean, you can look at the contours, the grading is very even. So if there's enough water over where the stairs are now, where the dock used to be, I don't see any reason why we couldn't put it off of the landing. That would be the logical place to put it. It's not part of this proposal because we weren't sure where this was going to end up.
So just as sort of following up on what you were saying, right now, or up until, prior to this summer, the way the lot was used was literally from lot line of 85 to 20 to 30 feet from the lot line of 89. You can see boat storage way over here. You can see another staircase over here with a mooring. This entire waterfront was used up and down. So what we're really trying to do, and I know you're saying we're not seeing much change, but we're trying to take that spread out use, which, as we were saying, to the east of that staircase is and was heavily used. You can see boats being stored 100 feet to the east of that staircase. We're proposing to let that go back to, replant some and let that go back to natural and concentrate from the existing staircase to the boathouse all the use, as opposed to this, thin strip with or without a bulkhead that forces the use just up and down the shoreline, which is what has been happening, for the last 40 years or so.
By renters or whatever, not.
Well, by anyone. If you don't have an area to use, to go down and poke your chairs or have people sitting down there or whatever, people just spread out along the shoreline. I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, I've lived 5 to 7 doors, whatever it is, down for 12 years and watched that happen with all my neighbors. And when they have some place to go to, they go to it. When they don't, people just spread out. So even the owners of this used it like that because, they just, it was there, so they used it. We're trying to propose to let that go back to natural, so we're condensing the use.
And I don't know if the board, some of the board members might not remember, but you just issued a certificate of compliance for a project, a property where there was a concrete bulkhead that wasn't supposed to be there, that was there with a beach fill on top of it. Yeah. And we preserved the area we couldn't reduce it, but they put a new bulkhead, a vinyl bulkhead in front of that area and filled behind it with sand and recreated and restored the beach area. You just issued a certificate of compliance for that job probably 2 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. It was 65 Sequatum, just down the road.
Which is exactly what we're modeling this new bulkhead after.
Yeah. Except
and that actually sticks into the water possibly further than this does.
Probably, but it doesn't. But that's an indication where the project conserved what was there.
Right.
And granted, the area has morphed since the damage.
But you're focusing on the bulkhead. I'm not. I'm focusing on the deck.
A new structure, if you will.
Well, we were
So you're
talking
saying
about
the beach would be as usable as the deck? If we put a bulkhead and put sand You could use the beach just like you could use
Well,
it
I don't
there.
know, because I'm saying, well.
Which I think most people on the pond do that.
Yeah.
It's quite common.
It's not a structural thing. We struggle a little bit with a new structure actually being there. I from what you're saying, I mean, now that I'm looking at the site, I can believe that, because the whole shoreline saw massive damage during this past storm. I mean, ask Nikki, we've been up and down there helping people fix things and doing minor sand replenishments and shore things up more than we've ever had to do. So the fact that, I mean, I can believe that it took that wall out to the extent that it did. And the reason why that you probably didn't see the exacerbated erosion on the toe of this slope as opposed to abutting ones that didn't have any protection is probably because that wall was there and just failed towards the end, completely failed towards the end. The vegetative community that's starting to grow behind that is not even a year old. So if that wall was intact for more than a year ago, you wouldn't be seeing the vegetative community that's behind it, that's starting to be a bordering vegetative wetland. If that wall was there, you wouldn't be seeing that start to come in, and you also, if that wall was gone longer, has been gone longer than a year, you'd see more shrubby vegetation starting to come in. So I do believe that you're saying it's, within the year, that's been gone.
Is that a question, Amy? Are we questioning whether it's a pre-existing structure?
I was well, I mean, I knew it was, but I didn't know how long ago necessarily it was.
Because it's probably good for us to get that straight, because if it's pre-existing, then they have a right to
I think it was
rebuild it.
pre-existing.
We have pictures to prove that.
Yeah, I would say it is pre-existing. But now that we're rebuilding, should you rebuild out into the water? Typically, like the other one that we did on 65 Sequatum, we put a sheet pile bulkhead right in front of an existing concrete one. The concrete one was structurally in much better shape than this one. It was there.
Starting to tip over.
It was starting to tip over, but it was very much there, so you could just support it. Here, you wouldn't put a bulkhead out in front of this deteriorated one.
No,
There's really nothing to put in front of it. You replace what's there. But does it make sense to put it there or at the mean high water line? In my mind, I think there was a structure there. It's just a matter of where it should go, to me. And then the deck is another discussion.
The deck's a whole different issue, but if I can jump in front for a second, I really appreciate your vision for the property.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fantastic what you're trying to do there. But along the ideas of naturalizing the shorefront, under your alternative analysis, the do-nothing option, which would just not do nothing for the whole thing, but for the bulkhead, did you consider not replacing the bulkhead and having that beach just naturalize, which it's close to being right now? Is that something you thought about doing?
The problem is if you don't replace the bulkhead, there's literally no way to use the waterfront there. Because of the boat waves that come in, they would come all the way in. And any storm would be completely up the bank. I mean, again, and I'm speaking, like if I go down to where I lived or I look at the 65 that you mentioned, I mean, these are structures that, like my deck was 3 feet off the water, and 65 is probably about 3 feet off, 2.5 feet off the water, something like that.
That still gets flooded.
And it still is taking on. So this shore, without that bulkhead, just boat waves alone and even minor storms will come all the way up to the top. You couldn't maintain any use of the property.
Right. I mean, the photos look like a nice little beach right there, and I think that clearly the bulkhead went out, which I don't think is desirable from a conservation standpoint. A long time ago, the bulkhead was set out. So I know from our interest, we'd love to see it come in and see the beach reestablished. I think you have a right to rebuild it, my interpretation, but I would ask the question, or at least offer the opinion that the do-nothing option for the bulkhead isn't a bad option for the way it looks. So,
if I just could comment one other thing on that. So part of my property, and I don't know if you remember or not, Amy, but at 51, had the existing deck, and the Conservation Commission let us rebuild that.
Yes.
And then there was natural property beside it. The natural beach every third year was just completely gone. And we were saying, can we put new sand on, can
Yep.
we do this, can we do that? And it was just a constant battle of replacing, bringing sand down, beating the hell out of the slope, bringing it down. It was just a nightmare to deal with. There's just no easy way along this whole side of the lake to.
Right, you had 3 northeast storms last
Yeah.
winter. You got.
But even beyond those, I mean, those were
Sure.
horrific. I mean,
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like them down here, but even prior to that, every year we were dealing with something that was destroying that. And, you know, again, the way I looked at the bulkhead was the amount we were pulling it in, that eliminating that structure, if you will, we were replacing with deck. So I wasn't trying to come in here and say, hey, I just want a deck, I don't want to give up anything. I was trying to pull that in enough to compensate for the deck. Because again, I've found if you put a deck there, most of the people go there and that's the end of it. You have you don't have as much use anywhere else, and it worked out well on our other property. And, you know, whether this bulkhead needs to be, you know, where it was, where we're proposing, or another 2 feet in, I'm not like saying I'm wedded to anything. I'm trying to do the right thing here, but also get the use of spending a lot of money on the property and trying to get the most family use for a long, long time out of it. So that's kind of where I'm ending up with it. I mean, I would really do want to rebuild the bulkhead, but if we brought it in some, we also talked about the idea of not just doing the sheet pilings, but actually doing rocks in front of it to
Yeah.
create a natural habitat.
Break up some wave action.
Yeah,
too.
this is gonna sound crazy, but like at the existing house that we were in, you know, we actually used to have an eel living in the rock wall that was established there that would actually could hand feed the eel. It was kind of funny. Had a name.
Yeah, people on that facing, people have been building up rock walls forever.
Yeah,
On that
yeah.
pond. That's what people do. Every year they get out, they pick up rocks, they rebuild their walls. It gets pounded with winter storms.
Yeah.
And that's just
And I thought it would just be good to, you know, diffuse that
It would.
new bulkhead,
Yeah.
you know, if it were to do the sheet material with a sloped, you know, natural rock material to create a natural habitat, break up the waves and whatnot. Again, I'm not wedded to that, but it seemed like a way to help mitigate it.
So looking forward, we've got, you know, a lot to talk about here tonight. It sounds like there's some concerns about the new structure in 0 to 50, and I think I agree with that. And there's some discussion on the pathways. You would give up one existing pathway or no?
You know, what do I want to do? I'd like to have a staircase for most people to use and a ramp to be used occasionally, and build the ramp in such a way, not true handicap, because that would mean it would have to be a
And they're
lot
like crazy,
longer.
yeah.
That was one of the reasons
Are
why.
there 2 now? Are there 2 going down?
No.
Well, there
on the
are
other-
2.
on the other
There's
property.
one staircase
Oh.
down here, there's one staircase here, and then there's another lot. So these are broken into 3 lots that technically each could have a staircase.
Mhm.
What I was trying to do is still limit that 3.
Yep.
And just to consolidate them. I hear certainly what everyone's saying about build the ramp as a structure. The problem is, as a structure, then you really need to get more toward a much more gradual slope, and handrails and all of that. I was trying to eliminate that, and Dan and I talked it through extensively. We talked to the site contractor and whatnot of how that could be done, and we talked about it a little
Yeah.
bit there. And I think it might have even been your not, I wouldn't say suggestion because I don't know that you were in favor of it, but like don't do the downward. If you were going to consider anything, just cut in and upward as opposed to affecting any of the downward slope at all. So it allowed for just a limited area to be affected and easily to be replanted in conjunction with the top of slope plantings that were suggested.
Be interested in knowing a little bit more about when you say the creation of the diagonal path, just how much has to be cut in order to create a wide enough flat surface
Sure.
for people to actually get down, and then would you need to somehow support it in any way, either the side that or on the downward side to prevent people from erosion from happening. I guess I just want it is fairly steep slope, so just maybe a little bit more detail on that.
Sure, and we can create that. We do feel like we could create something that was not invasive, and could control the water runoff, and pitched in a way that it wasn't creating anything onto the down
Yeah.
side. But I certainly,
Yeah,
we
I think
create
I was
a detail
picturing-
on that.
When we first spoke, I think I was really picturing almost like just treads almost in the bank, very minor, but I think looking at the slope today, you need to cut in a little bit more. So maybe some greater detail on that so the commission can decide whether something raised a little bit. If you were to go with the ramp, still want to go with the ramp, maybe a little bit more detail on options would
So
be
we can
good.
come up with sort of some more details.
Since you have to
just
come
show
back
some
anyways for me,
various-
because they have to come back for me, so.
I cut in front of Jim. Did you have any comments, Jim?
John,
Oh, sorry.
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 I've been cut.
It's getting late.
Yeah, it is. I guess a lot has been said, and I'm with most of it. I guess I have a question about the other set of steps here. Why do you need to keep those, particularly if what you're talking about is trying to concentrate use of the shoreline in one place? You're talking about another set of steps way over here that you want to maintain, presumably so people have access to the shore.
So that set of steps, as I said, those 6 lots get condensed to 2.
Yeah,
So this set of steps stays connected with this lot. We're not looking to improve them, change them. They are what they are on their own.
Right.
These 2 lots would be how we're asking for the ramp and the staircase. So this we're just not looking to change.
So I understand your answer to the question to be that you want to maintain those steps to go with this lot regardless of what might happen to that lot in the future.
Correct.
All right, okay. So then, sort of a little bit out of line with what everybody else has said. I mean, I do kind of feel like you're saying contradictory things about the deck and the maintaining the sand, maintaining the bulkhead. I mean, it sounds like you still want to be able to use that shoreline at the same time that you're saying you're going to build a deck to draw people to stay on the deck. So I'm a little, it seems to me that in that context, that your desire to keep the bulkhead, keep the additional land that is associated with maintaining that bulkhead is in contradiction to wanting to have the deck. And, it may not be possible in terms of regulations, but it almost seems to me like there would be less impact if you could just have the deck, no bulkhead, and let whatever happens with the rest of it, or combine the desire for a deck with a desire for a dock license and forget the bulkhead. And I don't understand why that isn't considered to be an option here, even though it would require variances, but I'm not sure the variances are more or less than what you're already talking about.
So, well, just to comment on the use, just to be clear, because I don't want to be making contradictory statements. So right now, if we think about the waterfront from, let's see this, but the boathouse to somewhere right in this area, it's all used. There are boats stored down here. There's a small little beach access here. You have the large beach access here, and then the boathouse. What we're trying to do is condense that to the deck and some sand area behind the bulkhead, but also having pulled that back already 6 to 8 feet. So we're going from what's presently being used from here to here and all the way out to here to being used from here and only into here. So the area gets cut about in half of what is being used now to what we're proposing. So we absolutely, if it sounds contradictory, then it's again the way I'm describing it, but if you looked at the land area that we're proposing versus what is currently in use, it's about half of that area. And, you know, you still do need some natural area because, you know, you have a few people down there, whatever, people are going to spill off the deck. So that's why I want to create at least that, maintain that area of sand or lawn or what, you know, whether back to what it was, or I would think the easier and better solution is sand, but it could just go back to what it was. I mean, the alternative in my mind to any of this is rebuild the bulkhead, exactly what the picture shows, fill it, create lawn again, and that's it. I didn't think that was the best proposal, but that's the most logical and what I would say is the, for lack of a better way of putting it, is the more by right. It's grandfathered, it's been there, there's a lot of people that have stated it's been there for a long time, it was there 9 months ago, so we just put it all back. But I just thought this plan was a better plan. And I understand now it becomes a balance of what can you trade off, what's usable and whatever. But if you ask me between this plan and just putting the existing bulkhead, fix it, put lawn in there and use that whole thing, I'd probably go for the lawn. It's a fabulous area. It's a much bigger, more spread out area. I mean, if you look at this, I don't know where it ended up, but the small picture I sent around, you know, that lawn area is you know, phenomenal. It's a very, very large area. I mean, you'd have a volleyball game down there. And I was trying to condense that, but if the board, you know, sort of disposition on it all was, look at, we'd rather just put back what was there, I don't necessarily have a problem with that either. It's a great, it would be a great resource, maybe better than what I'm proposing.
So, my question about that would be whether that's really sustainable. And I don't mean that in an environmental way, I just mean in terms of keeping that in shape. I mean, that lawn is, I mean, if you're really gonna restore it to where it was, it's barely above mean low water, right? I mean, that's wet soil, which, I mean, maybe last winter was an aberration, maybe not, but that's gonna be pounded repeatedly. And I would think that if the Conservation Commission was gonna permit that, there would be restrictions that would be put on about how you could maintain that lawn. You might be able to seed turf grass there, but you wouldn't be able to do much of anything else. And whether you can maintain an appealing lawn in that way, I don't know, particularly in that location.
I think, I've never seen the site with the bulkhead there. I was just brought on here quite recently. For me, the do-nothing option that Brad was talking about, if we look at how quickly this site deteriorated and you don't do anything, I think in the next year, all of that beach is gone, all of the BVW is gone, and now you've got erosion slapping at the very base of the slope. Because if this much damage occurred this quickly, the rest of it's going to be gone a year from now.
You notice how, without any intervention on either side where the bulkhead is, there's zero erosion.
How can you say that? But there used to be lots of land there, and it's all gone, to the point where the water's moved in, and that's why you have your wetland plant community.
Right, but there's no erosion on the bank.
Well, that's not true. The staircase, if you look at the staircase that goes down on this lot, this staircase, it is completely eroded into the bottom several steps of the staircase. They're completely gone.
That's probably mainly due to human traffic.
No. That 100% due to the water.
That's what I'm saying. The vegetation protects the bank. You can clearly see that in your own photos on either side.
Right.
Seems to do a really nice job.
All of this, as it's eroding, is what was protecting the slope. And so much of this went away after the bulkhead deteriorated. The next whack is going to take the rest of it, and then you're going to have erosion right up against the bulkhead.
I agree that the shoreline would become, you know, one smooth arc, but it would likely replicate what's on either side. It's, you know, maybe not what you want to do and not what's going to happen here, but I don't think it's correct to say that the bank would come down.
Well, the bank is coming down at that staircase. I mean, from just that last storm, over, you know, January, February, you lost 3 feet minimum of that bank on
Yeah,
that
I
side.
didn't look at that side, you know, wasn't in the scope of this.
And that's all naturally planted and whatever, or was. It's gone now. It's completely gone. So anywhere where there were not, you know, very large bushes, trees, that type of thing was just, you know, was just wiped out.
Essentially naturalization, which does a really nice job of protecting that. Anywhere along that pond that's truly naturalized does not have erosion.
I mean, you know, as I said, I mean, if all of the complexities of what I'm proposing is over the top, you know, I would say I, one, apologize for bringing it over the top because that wasn't my intention, and two, would easily go back to, I just want to go back to what was grandfathered in there, put the bulkhead back, and either put it as sand or lawn, whatever made more sense. Maybe to your point, it would make sense of just being sand and it's not lawn because it's hard to maintain down there and, you know, whatnot. But I would certainly go back to that in a heartbeat and make it an easier thing to digest as a whole. You know, I'm not sure.
I'd just like to make one other comment, which is, and I agree with what Brad said, is I like what you're doing here, and I guess in my own mind, I mean, aside from the details that we're trying to parse apart and figure out what makes sense, you know, reducing the number of dwellings on the pond seems like a big plus, since, you know, big picture problem on this pond isn't so much, you know, erosion, point erosion somewhere on the bank. It's nutrients flowing into the pond, and when, you know, when are things going to go downhill steeply again on that pond? So, you know, you're making a contribution in that way, and I think that's a great thing. I mean, as opposed to 20 or 30 people
Right.
for 12 weeks or whatever it is all summer long on there.
And you know, and I was hoping, and I understand that the regulations aren't always compatible with this hope, is that the board would look at, you know, the 3,000 square feet of structures coming out of the 100 and moving the bulkhead in to try to offset for the deck and those type of balancing acts. But again, maybe the complexities of everything I'm, you know, trying to do, you know, in some way conflict each other and whatever, and the simpler way to propose it is to just replace the bulkhead, fill it, and do, you know, the shed, and, you know, we would just repair a set of stairs, which I'm okay with. I wasted a lot of paper and did a lot of things if that's what I come back to, but, you know, in any event, I have no problem with that either, because that creates a functional use and, you know.
How do you feel about the possibility of pulling the bulkhead back, losing the deck, and then finding a way to get the second access? Is that something that, I think the deck itself is really hard for us to authorize.
And I get that, I do get that.
And whereas a second access site, given that, you know, you've got the multiple lots, we probably can figure out something there. But I think you're hearing from folks that there's, you know, no one's really jumping on board with the bulkhead, but I think if you are grandfathered, you can do that. But I would think it would be a more sustainable structure to bring it in a little bit and gain that resource benefit, which is what I think you're looking for too.
Right. So what would be, so let's say we pulled that in, we eliminated the deck, maybe we have some sort of landing platform that the stairs landed on, just so there's a solid point to hit onto, but nothing, you know, right in front of the shed.
It'll
maybe.
probably join a dock at some point.
Right,
Like
right.
a walkway from the stairs to
Right.
the, okay.
So would the area, that other area behind the bulkhead, not the light green area that we're replanting, well, I guess we wouldn't necessarily be replanting that because we're not eliminating it on the other side, but
Well,
would that
yeah.
just be replaced, would we just be filling with sand like they did at 65? And you now just have,
I think that's what, you know, you could do that, right?
So it is, right now it is reverting to BBW, so whether you put a structure over it or maybe fill it, it still is the alteration of a BBW. I think, so, but what I think the addition of the non-structural would be the easier permittable way to do it.
Restoring what was grandfathered.
Yes.
Could I pose
put
something?
sand there, but then maybe still do
Still
the
do the
100
planting at the end.
Still do the 180 square feet of BBW planting to restore that portion, because you are going to technically be filling the one that's emerging right now.
Okay, so this is a proposal for you too.
Okay.
It just comes in my brain, okay? If we eliminate the deck for now, we work on the path.
Yeah.
Now, the path my vision of the path is you have to cut into the hillside roughly 4 feet.
Yeah.
From the inside, let's say the slope is like this. You
Yeah.
cut into the hillside. Now, from that point, you still have to cut back to a stabilized slope. So you're removing a lot of material, but
Yep.
you're not filling. And then that slope gets stabilized. So that's the way you can do it without fill, but there is some cut. Now, the
I think
path
I know what you're
itself,
saying, but I need to see it.
so the
Favor.
path itself, what I envisioned was parts of the path could be steeper and then level off, and then steeper and level off. And that provides a place for water to pool and infiltrate as opposed to just a stream going straight down.
That's the issue.
There's a number of ways to do that. We can give you a detail to do
I'd
that.
be happy to look at drafts for you, like, you
But
have
my-
to come back anyway.
My idea was, let's say that you ditch the deck for now. You know we're gonna come back with a dock proposal, probably in the area of where that deck is. And then you could deal with the structures, because at that point, they're water dependent. Whether it's a walkway from the
Right, right.
landing to the bulkhead,
Exactly.
to the deck, or whatever. We can deal with that structure on a separate filing.
Yep.
It might make it a lot easier for you guys right now, and we'll deal with it later at the appropriate time. Does that, like, lift a weight?
Conceptually,
Yeah.
yes.
Well,
I just-
theoretically,
yeah.
to, you know, for probably to anyone to quote
That's
unquote
for you to
buy
con-
into that,
Yeah. That's for you to
You'd-
consider too.
you know, I'm buying into that, okay, fundamentally, we're not coming back and asking for a deck. Because one thing I know you're not gonna wanna hear is we agree on all this, and then we come back with a dock permit that includes a 400 square foot deck. That's, you know,
Probably wouldn't
similar
be
to
on
a
their-
slap in the face.
yeah,
So
we
it's
probably
like,
wouldn't
you
be on
know,
their good side after
right,
that.
right. So I think that, you know, let me
That's
digest
for you
that
to
a little
decide,
bit.
right.
I mean,
Why don't you, take some time,
Yeah.
think about what's happened.
I mean, from what you had just said, if we were to pull the bulkhead in, fill that with sand, eliminate the deck, I mean, how does everyone feel about that? I mean, I know you had some concerns about the bulkhead, period. I mean, how did everyone feel about that idea of pulling that in where it is grandfathered and losing the deck?
Are you talking about moving the bulkhead shoreward?
Yeah.
Right, right. To
But-
where, yeah, so,
it's shown
it,
here.
yeah, it was
From
out
there
here,
to there.
right, so moving it in at 6 to 8 feet is
From
coming
my
in.
perspective, you've got the right to put the bulkhead wherever you want to,
Mhm.
within the footprint that existed previously. So move it in, fine, but, leave it where it is, fine too.
Right,
I mean, that's your call, not ours, really.
Mhm.
Do we get any brownie points for moving it
Yeah,
landward?
I think you do, because I think
Yeah.
there's greater resource impacts by rebuilding it where the footprint that it's in.
Right. You'd
Mhm.
be,
Less
you'd
fill, less-
filling a
less
lot more,
everything.
Yeah, so
Right.
I'm not sure of that, depending on, how it's built and how high it is and that sort of thing.
Well,
And whether they put rocks on the outside of it and all, so.
I think you gain land underwater, so I think there's resource benefits. Look at the picture here, it's sticking out, pull it back in, you gain land underwater, that's significant in my mind.
Mhm.
I like, the discussion of not having a bulkhead, but I appreciate your right to rebuild it, so I think that's where we are.
Did you have a comment on that, Mark?
How far back are you talking about pulling it from where it's currently shown now?
8 feet, right?
It's 6 to 8 feet is the difference. It's
From the existing structure?
from the existing
To the new
structures.
proposed wall?
Right.
Okay.
As shown.
Yep, no, I see that, I
Just show
understand
them
that.
All right, well, that gives you a lot to think about and to
More is
consider.
better.
And I
Fair
think
enough.
we've got to move on to the next hearing, I
Yeah,
feel.
we have some more,
And just one
not
other
to,
comment, because you were talking at the very end about where you want to keep your stairs, whether you leave them where they are now or back where you were proposing here, and I'm not trying to create any discussion, but just something to consider as to where you want this and all of this.
Well, thank you, very interesting proposal.
You wanna meet and go over things again, let me know.
Yeah, I mean, can we,
Yeah, so actually we need to officially continue for till November 7th, that's our next one.
Okay, I move that we continue the hearing till November 7th. Seconded, all those in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
3 weeks because we have a fifth one.
I think we can get there. I think we just can make things up.
So I'll need something.
That
within
bank
2
was
weeks.
awfully steep
It is,
Prior.
and narrow.
yeah.
That's my thing.
You know what I'm
Putting wood
thinking?
won't do it, because then you don't have any vegetation in the wood, and it'll just wash out.
I'm thinking what might be an option is to extend that
Thanks, everyone.
and bring it back here,
Sorry, everybody.
reconfigure this, and by doing that,
I don't see how it makes
Tough
sense.
hearing
next?
this tonight.
The contour
Yep.
gets steeper
We're
back
going
in
to
here.
Barton, right?
well, that's okay, but you gives a little more flexibility
Losing things left and right here.
ultimately.
Okay, next we have a notice of intent for the Barton property at 11 River Pine Circle, proposal to replace existing fiber rolls with rock revetment.
Good evening. Royal Growski, Land and Sea Engineering. I'm here with Emma from Blue Flax Design. We came here, probably don't remember because it was after this late, a while ago, kind of queried the board on the Barton property, 11 River Pine Circle. They, were coming in to try to replace when they came to me, they were trying to replace their failing fiber rolls with a bulkhead, and we talked to you guys, we showed you some pictures of what happened. I worked with Amy, and we decided that a bulkhead wasn't appropriate here or needed, so we're coming back to replace existing failing permanent fiber rolls with a rock riprap revetment, approximately 110 feet long. I'm sure you've been to the project. As part of this, there was twofold problems. One, the fiber rolls were not put in the best way. They were put in too low. Fiber rolls are not ever made to be put in water. When water gets in them, they become buoyant and they start moving around. They tear the cables. Part of that looks to me that originally the fiber rolls that were permitted were wire encased fiber rolls, which were lobster traps. They didn't put that in any way, shape, or form. It's an excuse for a hard structure. It's almost vertical. There's a lot of wave run up. The landscaping that was done there was not done appropriate to what should have been there in terms of stopping downstream erosion. So we were getting undercut erosion from the fiber rolls being displaced and erosion from the top. They've been failing for 3 years. We've documented that. As you can see in the picture there, they just keep getting pulled out and flopped around. You should have plans you can kind of see. This photo is a current drone photo, was just taken a while ago. The beach has increased a little from some of the sediment there, so there's a healthy beach there now. Originally, there was a bulkhead across this whole thing that was denied. That's why the fiber rolls are in there. And I don't know if it was kind of a, it wasn't documented, but there was kind of conversation if, you have to try the fiber rolls. If they don't work and you really give it the effort, we'll entertain you coming back in with something else. That's where we are. What we're proposing is a rock revetment with, the top of its elevation 8 feet mean low water, which is approximately a foot higher than the existing fiber rolls. We couldn't go much up higher because then we'd really be bringing up that slope. It has pretty substantial 500-pound stone toe. That's going to be a temporary alteration underneath the beach. So we basically dig a hole there, bury those stones, and bring them up the slope, then cover them back over. And then we put smaller, one comment from Amy was that she thought the 200-pound stone might be a little small. The notes actually say 200 to 300-pound stone, which is a substantial rock. I looked at the currents in there, and they seem to range from about, it looks like it's really hauling, but it's really about 1 to 2 knots tops. And that size stone is way above any design standards for that type of flow. Icing and pullout was another issue, but the way this is configured, the ice is gonna, on the ebb and flow, it's not really gonna impact that. And when the sea ice attaches to that stone, it's gonna be an overnight freeze or whatever. It's gonna go in and then it's gonna drop. So it's not gonna pull out the stone from what I can calculate. As part of this whole thing, we're also proposing, which Emma's gonna go over, to redo the entire landscape area as the mitigation for this to, and I'll let her speak of that because that's not my expertise. That was a major concern from the chairman before. And that's about my part of it. I can answer any questions, or we can go to the full presentation and then you can ask questions.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to chime in now? Or?
Let's do the landscape stuff too.
Okay, sure.
So our vegetation management plan is going to be addressing the previous mitigation plan, which actually you can see really clearly in this aerial photo, which I think is helpful. We're basically going to be building off of what is working and trying to improve on what isn't working. So we have a really great area of existing bearberry that's really healthy. That's all going to be preserved. There are existing shrubs throughout, including Virginia rose. There's some bayberry, sweet fern, and let's see, some beach plum that's all planted throughout. And so those will remain as well. There's a large area, and I do have a couple of photos.
I'm going to hold the other side for you.
Oh. And so, well, we could just, I'll hold it this way. And so there's this whole area at the top of the bank is currently planted with a cultivar of switchgrass. It's northwind switchgrass, so it's a tall switchgrass that really hasn't done a good job of filling in around on the base and creating a solid ground cover in that area. So we're proposing to transplant that out of the mitigation area to another place on the property and fill that area in with fragrant sumac. So 31 fragrant sumac. We're also proposing to remove all of the mulch that was put in that mitigation area, rake it out, remove it. We'll overseed with a native grass and wildflower mix, and then blanket the slope around the existing shrubs. And then, so we'll really be creating a solid ground cover throughout the entire thing to capture and slow storm water, and then also stabilize the soil and prevent the erosion that's happening down towards the lower bank. And so there are also a couple of previous mitigation trees that haven't survived. We're proposing to replace 3 dead oak trees that are in this corner of the mitigation area with 4 eastern red cedars, just due to the exposure in that area. Those trees didn't survive. So we're also proposing temporary irrigation for these plantings where there was previously no irrigation. And I believe that's it for that. I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
I think I'm going to...
I do have one more comment,
okay.
Sorry. We are supplementing the entire area with, so in total we're planting 59 native shrubs. We're supplementing the existing plantings with more beach plum and more bayberry. So interplanting what is existing to really fill it in and get good vegetative cover.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to give you the 2-minute version of my impression because I was here when this was voted in, and it came out very different from what I expected. I've also been going to the spot for many years, and that 0 to 50 used to have more natural vegetation, and I think particularly on the eastern end, we really lost a lot of that with the project, and to me it became really cosmetic looking, sparse, cosmetic looking. It wasn't my vision of how that 0 to 50 should come out of this project. And so I hate to be critical that way, but at the same time I think it's an opportunity, maybe to improve things. We're really here to look at the revetment probably foremost, but at the same time I really haven't been very thrilled with the way it came out. And some of it's the way things grew, but also it's what we approved. Well, somewhat what we approved. And but I think it's
they didn't plant everything you approved. It wasn't done exactly.
Okay. It's very sparse. It looks cosmetic to me. I think that it lost some of the function that it had before, particularly on the eastern end,
Yeah.
where there was some oaks and different types of natural shrubs. So I would just, that's my soapbox on this opportunity to maybe spruce things up, as long as it's compatible with what the property owner's hoping to do as well. I think it would be an opportunity to do something there.
Yeah, I think getting much better vegetative cover is definitely the goal of our plan, to get a good ground cover and more shrubs in there.
Yep.
And I'd like some even bigger than shrubs, the red cedar, I think. And, you know, there were more, you know, can be produced. And do you recall years ago there was more trees in that eastern end? It was more of a natural, you know, bank. And I think, you know, that changed. And I think that wasn't really an intention of what we had hoped to authorize. So maybe there's some opportunity here to fix that up. Amy, any thoughts on the overall project?
We'll stick with the planting for now, and then I'll jump to the wall. I agree with you with the plantings. Some things worked and some things didn't. Not everything went in that should have. I think it's still, we haven't done a certificate of compliance for that old one yet, I don't believe. But, so that being said, I mean, on paper, everything looked good with the plantings, but it's a really exposed site, so between the sun and the salt wind, it's a really, really hard site to plant. So even with the best intentions, sometimes they don't go exactly to plan. We do have a good idea of what does do good here, though, now, because we see the bearberry does good, the bayberry, beach plum. So those are all things that you're proposing to use. The fragrant sumac, you're getting native ones coming in at the base of the slope already, so we know that that's a species that likes to be there. Eastern red cedar will tolerate the exposed conditions, especially if you get smaller ones to start with. I don't have any problem with getting smaller trees if they're going to live. They've transplanted these oaks twice now, and oaks should grow, but oaks are hard to transplant. So
yeah, I think if you were looking to plant any more oak trees, they'd probably have to be tubling size.
Exactly.
Or 2 gallon.
Yeah.
Really small. Yeah.
We already have a lot of oaks on the property. I actually think eastern red cedar is very appropriate here. So I think the planting in general is going to benefit because the plantings didn't do so well too, and because the entire site pitches towards the water, you did get the top-down erosion, and which not only prevented other stuff from growing, but also helped kick the bags out, the fiber rolls out. So fiber rolls are not supposed to be, we're jumping now to the wall. So fiber rolls are not really supposed to be exposed to water inundation, as Roy said, and prolonged sun exposure. They do degrade over time. If they weren't installed or anchored exactly correctly, that only exacerbates the problem. I think in a best case situation, they last like 7 to 10 years. Here it's been, what, about 5?
Basically every year.
Right.
Since they.
But you've had to replace.
Yes.
But so essentially we're at the point, if you've been there today, we're at the point of failure for the wall. The whole wall is completely slumped down itself, and then certain ones have already kicked out. So I think if you were even in the best situations, if you were going to reinstall, one of the alternatives is to reinstall fiber rolls. In my opinion, that's not the best alternative, because I think you'll still, even if it's installed correctly, you're going to see me back here in 7 to 10 years, and you're going to have to do some replanting then too, because you're going to be redisturbing things. It is a pre-78 dwelling. It's not close to the top of the bank, but the bank is within the 100-foot. So there is some granting of protection for such dwellings.
Isn't there a linear foot metric on how many feet it needs to be?
Not on a pre-78.
I thought there was
If
some.
it is I believe so. I think if it's a post-78, if it's closer than 40 feet, there's some, I have to check exactly.
Okay, maybe it's post.
It's not, the house is in no danger of falling in, but still, you want to protect the stability of that bank for the upland parts. One question we did have on site, and I think as I'm sitting here talking, I've answered it, but I just want to make sure. Stakes that you have out in the field, that's where the toe stones, that's the extent of the toe stones in the river.
That's the extent of the temporary alteration. The stones are
Right.
going to hit behind where the face of the new stone.
Yep.
It's gonna hit behind where the existing fiber rolls
Okay.
are. We're gonna try to intersect that, just
Yep.
in the mean high water. We are gonna license the structure
Yep.
after, because there's no way you're gonna put a structure here that's not gonna end up needing a license.
Right.
Chapter 91, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
How far inside of the existing rolls?
We're gonna be like you can look at the cross-section of the drawing, we're like right behind them, kind of
Few
trying to come in
inches.
there. We can't really, that's where it's gonna go, so, there's a temporary alteration from the stakes. And that's gonna be
Exactly.
covered. And,
That's what we were,
just one, go ahead, finish.
sorry, I was just gonna say, that was a question on site today. We saw the stakes out in the water, and before when I visited this, it hadn't been staked yet, because I've been to this property quite a few times, as we know. But it hadn't been staked yet, so it didn't occur to me until just now, oh, that's where the buried stones are
Yes.
gonna go. So that is a temporary impact. Those are all gonna be above, below
So what do
The
those
dirt.
stones look like?
500
Well, they're
pound.
500-pound stones, so 100
Take 'em in.
100-pound stone is called a two-man stone.
Right.
That's like what you and your buddy can
Yeah.
throw in there. A 200-pound stone, you're not moving without a machine.
Right.
And a 500-pound stone is, stone's 100 and, just pictured 150 around cubic feet,
So
pounds
why,
per cube.
why
So
are they so far out from the face of the
because
wall?
you have, if you don't bury this toe
Yep.
underneath, and then you put all this weight up here, it's just gonna go.
So
Gravity's.
is it a single row of stones and it's just sand behind it?
Well, you can look at the cross section. So we put 2 layers of fabric. Here, I'll give you the bigger one. Do you want the bigger one?
Here, I have a huge one.
Yeah.
I have a few huge ones, so
I
share.
have.
So you see, what you do is you put 2 layers of fabric down,
Behind, yeah.
so none of the sand can migrate through the stone
Yeah.
from wave action or water action. Then you put the larger stones down the bank, buried and underneath the bottom.
Yeah.
Then you just basically, the slope part that you see is where you put the smaller stones, and that the reason for that is you don't need the bigger stones. The smaller stones will have more surface area. They'll break up any kind of waves more. That was one issue with the fiber rolls too. Everybody thinks fiber rolls, they were mainly instituted back when I was working about 10 to 15 years ago because the DEP, it was a way around the DEP.
Of course.
And they didn't have it in the regulations, so they couldn't deny it. That's the only reason they exist.
Soft
I think it was Peter
structure.
Markounis who found them back then.
So
I
those-
remember.
those stones are like 3 feet deep of
Yeah.
multiple stones.
Yes.
And then they'd be covered with a foot or two of
Yeah.
sand.
So in answer to your question, if you don't put that whole underneath part in,
Yeah.
that other one will just go like this.
I didn't see this cross section here, and then in the cross section, the fiber rolls are depicted there.
Yes.
Essentially.
So
Yeah.
that's how we're
They
coming.
wouldn't be there.
Well, it appeared the stakes were about 4 feet out from the existing fiber
Correct.
rolls.
Right.
Yeah, that's what we were concerned about.
Is that shellfish habitat?
In Amy's comments, it is shellfish habitat. It's listed. We don't have the DMF letter
Yeah.
back, but it's habitat. It's not in the town shellfish area, I believe.
It's, I have to
Should be.
check what I wrote.
We'd be happy
It's
to.
right around the corner from, actually, I did check. It's right around the corner from what Heinz has, I wrote it down here somewhere.
Yeah, it was always a soft shell clam
But it's
flat.
not mapped.
People
The
used to
river
think
is
that
not
it
mapped.
was a
Nearby is
fine
mapped for
place.
oysters.
Right, so we'd be happy to remove and replace the shellfish there. It'd actually be a habitat for oysters.
It will be,
In the
yes.
rock on the bottom, they'll grow there.
Yep.
So rather, fiber rolls, nothing grows. They're just kind of an eyesore. They also are acting as a ramp right now.
Yeah.
So they're pushing, when that water comes in, it's rolling right up over them and causing erosion. The rocks will stop that.
It's not,
It's not town mapped, it is state mapped, right?
Oh, this shellfish thing, they're not.
We know that, yeah.
So it's
it's-
not within a state map also.
I meant to say it was.
Oh.
So it would be determined and laid out that the face of the wall would be behind or shoreward of where the fiber rolls were originally put in before they slumped down.
Yes.
Basically.
So it would be a more gradual slope that went almost the vertical that
Vertical.
this was when it went in.
Yeah, that makes sense, yeah.
So I mean, with more clarification now, I can recommend approval of this. We would need DMF letter, but,
We need DMF later, and we need file numbers.
right, so
Have
we
you
can't
been-
close
yeah.
tonight.
Right, we understand
Yeah.
that. Just, they're not
That's okay.
responding. I tried to call them, and I've heard it's
We could-
across the board.
It is across the board, or at least from what we're experiencing. When we get file numbers, they're at the 11th hour before a meeting, because they seem to know when our meetings are. They must look up, oh, they're meeting tonight, we need to get these numbers out. But they're short-staffed, they're not turning them around that quick.
I would request from the board that if we continue it, any engineering things with the wall, we try to deal with tonight.
Absolutely.
Gonna probably have Emma come back due to my schedule.
Yep.
So.
Well, I think we have a lot of questions, so
Yeah.
I think we're not at that point
Yeah.
yet.
No,
But
I
I'm just
understand that. I'm just saying.
Finishing my wrap-up.
Okay. Ernie, do you want to start?
Well, the shellfish one was the first one. You explained the markers, the stakes that we saw there. I like the bearberries rather. They really came in well on the side of the steps there. And it will tow into the existing bulkhead, the steel bulk that's there as well.
It's a
right?
vinyl bulkhead.
That's
yeah.
vinyl? Yeah, all right. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
No questions.
Okay. Jim?
Yeah, I think you already addressed my concern with the location of the tow. I was concerned you're going to try and put it out the face of the rivet and where those stakes were, but
No.
that's not the case. Yeah, for the plantings, I mean, obviously we already talked about that, and it needs to be a lot denser for that to work. It appears to be a fertilized lawn up there. That would be nice to change that practice.
And look into that.
Something we can chat with the owners about. One of them is here.
That's about all.
Stan? You want to set them up for when they come back? John, any thoughts?
I don't have any other questions, no.
Okay.
Just something to note both for yourself and, I met with Angel from Executive Landscaping out there recently, and I mentioned to her that we had this meeting coming up and that part of the meeting was the planting. She mentioned to me the dead trees there. I just want to make sure there's no overlap, that she's not doing the work that we're doing here. It should all be together. She was talking to me basically about the trees behind the garage that's going to have a second story on it. But while we were there, she said, oh, could you look at the dead trees? And I said, I think this is part of this. That was before I really looked at all of this.
And that's been corrected.
I just want to make sure there's not duplication,
Yeah,
that's
Chris
all.
called me
Right.
today.
Good,
Yeah.
Right.
good,
Verified.
that's all.
Okay. All right, I had a couple of comments. I think generally in the Herring River, at a lot of locations, I'm not a big fan of hard solutions where, certainly where it's not a grandfathered structure, I think that we don't allow them. Wetlands Protection Act doesn't allow them because of impacts. If it is a grandfathered structure, they can be allowed. And so in this case, I think that we did ask the property owner to try something.
Soft solution, yeah.
They tried it and it didn't work, so this is a location where I think I'm softening a little bit on the hard solutions, but I want to go back and I want to look at our regs closely and think about that and ask you for a couple things. The first thing you've already anticipated, I think it is a really good opportunity to improve that bank. And I'm thinking really of having a functional, diverse 0 to 50
Yep.
with wildlife habitat. And the other thing is that to the east there's salt marsh. What can you come back with us, either for analyses or discussion on scouring impacts to that salt marsh? Can you do some analyses on that? I'm worried about energy coming off the seawall of the revetment and taking out or reducing that salt marsh.
There's two things happening. There's side shore current, which is one thing, and then the other thing is wave deflection off the wall. Right now, the wave deflection is much higher because it's basically a hard vertical structure. It's almost acting as a bulkhead now. Part of my narrative is that the rocks are going to absorb that wave more. It's not going to come in. The waves are only this high.
Yep.
And so, in terms of longshore scouring and things, the fiber rolls at the base of them right now, there's beach. It's been sitting there. It's not changing. We're not really changing that.
Right.
So we don't think, the way we're looking at it, we don't just think, we looked at it all, because I was worried about that. That's why I said the bulkhead's a no. If you put a bulkhead in there,
lose it.
it would just run and it would take out that whole marsh.
Yep.
Right.
We think the way we're doing this, that the beach that's there is gonna stay there. And we'd be happy to have a condition and markers in there on the rocks that
Yep.
says if the beach does drop, we'll put it back in.
I definitely want that, but is there something you can do to help quantify what you just described? Because intuitively, I'm thinking the rocks would have more energy deflection than the fiber rolls.
It's the opposite, actually.
Yeah, see, I wouldn't expect that, so.
See,
Because of the rough
basically,
surface to
it's
it.
the rougher surface is gonna absorb the waves and break them up. The hard surface, and I can send over some literature on it.
Okay.
Basically, they have studies on.
There's no canned analyses you could do for these physical conditions?
That would be like a model, very complicated. It really, and it wouldn't really work because you have so many, you'd have to do all kinds of different things. You'd have to have incoming current, you'd have to have outcoming current, you'd have incoming current with waves. It's beyond the.
It'd be a $10,000 hydraulic model, which is.
It would probably, it's
Yeah,
just very.
okay. Well, then, I would say you can come back with something to help that concern, because the currents do rip there, 1 to 2 knots anyways.
Yeah.
And so I am concerned about how future conditions would be, to the west, not a problem, there's a boathouse there. To the east, how would future conditions impact that salt marsh? So that's one request.
Something that was interesting too before the rolls went in is you saw, obviously there was a huge scarp undermining where the rolls were for a couple of reasons. But you see most of the erosion down back behind the boathouse. That's where most of the erosion was. Because that's the general trend is even without anything there, the erosive forces were farther down. So hopefully, the hope is like where the salt marsh is in the northeast corner, there's not going to be much change there. If there was going to be any negative impact, I would think it would be farther downstream a little bit, towards the boathouse or beyond that.
Beyond the boathouse.
Well, then you not beyond the boathouse as a result of this revetment, but that's if there was erosion due to the bulkhead or the revetment, it would be down there.
One other thing to note, and you'd probably remember it if it was still there. There was a bulkhead out there. It's about 20 feet out from the shore. There's still the old poles out there. The only reason that whole salt marsh is in there is because the bulkhead was there, and then when the bulkhead dilapidated over time, it left a protected area which allowed that marsh to grow.
Right.
And then if you look at some of that old drawing I sent Amy today, there was actually salt marsh in front of that whole place.
Right.
But then as that bulkhead went farther away, it was gone.
Right.
So.
My guess is we have sea level rise occurring here, and the scouring.
You've got a foot in 100 years.
Yeah,
so.
I think the scouring is occurring there in our lifetimes, just, hanging out in the river, we've seen that occur. So I think that's something I'm interested in seeing. I guess I want to see some discussion on any possible shellfish mitigation for the tow. The tow, you're going to chew up that flat a fair amount during construction.
Do you normally condition that we remove everything and replace, or do you want an addition? We can go in with additional if needed. We'd kind of like, a
We've
recommendation.
Done both. I would say in this location, I would just maybe a minimal amount of replacement oyster seed after they're done.
I think I'm interested in soft shell clams.
Or soft, but after they're done, I wouldn't necessarily say prior to. Unless the commission wants them removed prior.
Yeah, I guess I'm just putting on the table, is there a mitigation component to this?
With docks, we see that. Because you are disturbing the intertidal here, I think there should be, I don't think it should be as much as what we would require for a dock.
Right.
But it's small, maybe a couple of bushels
I
or
think it should be
something
in
like
kind
that.
as well, this habitat gets a boost for the tow disruption for on-site.
I've spoken to the owner, and says, he had no problem with something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think it should be as much as a dock that we have.
No,
But-
I'm not a fan of the Johnny
But
Appleseed
whatever's
approach,
gonna
sending
cover
it all
that
around.
area, it should go there, it should go back there.
Okay, so a proposal for that, some, text, something to, calm my concerns about the salt marsh. I know you're pretty confident that it's not gonna happen. Some citations or some references that, I can consider. And then, do what you can with the the planting, I guess we have a plan before us. Is there something you can do for that eastern end to try to get it really diverse and thick, somewhat like it was before? You know, maybe add, you talked about red cedars to the west. Can you put some red cedars to on the eastern end as well?
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. We could put in a few more cedars here. We could add a few more of these shrubs. We really want to stick with the things that are doing well. So the beach plum and the bayberry are what we've suggested in this area, and the fragrant sumac. But and then I mean the Virginia rose is doing well as well. But yeah, I think we could add a couple cedars.
Is that compatible with what you're thinking? I'm thinking of a very lush 0 to 50 that's wildlife habitat.
Yes. Yes.
That helps with stability.
You didn't see all the rabbits?
And to see this shoreline ravished, the way it is ravished, the amount of money that has been put into this property to protect that shoreline,
Right.
to do the plantings, I think has been an incredible adventure, and it really needs to come to a stop.
Yeah, I can imagine.
We cannot have any more erosion. We've got to replace, repair. Now is our chance.
Okay.
I also want to emphasize that I think blanketing and seeding is going to make a big difference, removing that mulch from that
the mulch
area.
was not a good idea.
Getting
Yeah,
a
the
ground
mulch was
cover is
good.
extremely important. So that's going to be our number one, and then number two will be coming and filling in the holes with the extra shrubs. So.
And is that boundary the 50, the top of the coastal bank, or that's just the top of the resource area?
There's a couple of resources here.
Yeah.
We do have, so technically the 0 to 50 is, the top of the coastal bank is way up top.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is the revegetation of the coastal bank itself.
Right. Any encroachment of lawn to that top of the bank in the last 5 to 10 years that you can imagine? I mean, the house has been there forever, so that the lawn may have been there.
1892.
Yeah.
I think it was like 1920s, it's 1892.
1892.
It says 1920 in the census, doesn't it?
Well, they just put that in
Oh.
as a date for everything, rather than to research it.
Huh.
Looks good though, 1892.
Are you going to modify it?
I got the
Modify
pleasure to
your
see it
plan.
when you were just starting.
Yeah.
It's your son?
Okay.
My daughter.
Your daughter's house, yeah.
Any other comments for the continuance? Those are the things I had. I mean, do we have specs on details on the stones other than what you just described?
Have the sizing
Size is
sizing
typically
and
what we
the,
get.
Size, slope.
and it specifies, you know, rough cut stones.
Yep.
Right, it's not gonna be a
Do we
smooth face
have a
road.
benchmark already established? at any
No.
point?
Yeah.
Oh, we do?
On the plan.
No, existing on site, we don't.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's marked right here.
Oh, where they did the fiber rolls? Cool.
Well, that's the top. That's basically the spot right there is the bench.
Okay.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, one condition will be to, have a bench reference to the, footprint of where it's gonna be, so we know it's put
Yeah.
in where it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
That'll be a simple condition.
Well, there'll be, yeah. Basically, we'll stake it and then as-built it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we'll also, I think it'd be a good idea, we'll set chisel marks
Yes.
in the stone at grade.
That's a good idea.
And, we'd be happy to have a condition when it gets, if it gets approved, that says if it drops so much, then we'll
Right.
come back in and do a restoration.
Yep.
One note here is if you keep putting sand there, you're gonna fill in the channel.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of sources and bank sources to that channel, and that's gonna, that could be more of a problem than this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
I'm
think-
curious what can be done. I mean, I used to dig soft shell clams there years and years ago. It was a really abundant, dense area. And right now they're there, but it's very sparse. And so something's changed. Maybe stability might help. I don't know. Maybe seeding might help. So,
So we're looking at November 7th. It's our next meeting. So we're hoping for
It'll be last on the agenda again.
Oh, now that you were towards the end, I'm gonna try to put you first. How's that? We try to mix it up.
any other requests from commissioners? This is kind of a big deal,
This is a big deal.
revetment like this. They don't come along very often, and in the past, we've been very reluctant to authorize these. I think it's the right process for this site to, go in this direction.
And dealing with the revetment in the bank and getting the lawn into compliance with our current regulations is a pretty big help. And
Can you address that?
I could work with you on it.
Can you
too.
work with
Sure.
Amy
Yeah,
on the whole
absolutely.
lawn?
Yep.
Call me.
Yeah.
Fertilizer.
Yep.
yeah, the current regulations are now no fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides, or fungicides. So essentially like a natural lawn, a Cape Cod lawn. So that's a good help.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. So,
November 7th.
I move that we continue this to November 7th.
Second.
Seconded by Stan. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you.
Sorry about the end of the agenda.
Do we have one more, or?
Yeah.
We have one
I got
more,
one more.
yep, and then we actually
It's
have,
actually, I wish they had come the other way
issue.
because the next one
Oh,
is
yeah.
this one after it was built 50 years.
Oh,
That's
okay.
fine. Hopefully this will, after some clarification we had.
And I lost my landscaper who fell asleep, so we sent him
I
home.
saw that, yeah, Dan got tired.
One more.
He might just wanna watch the Red Sox, though, I'm thinking.
He didn't
that's-
look like, he looked like he was.
That's what I wanted.
He didn't like
He is
to
a
be
Red
wildly
Sox fan.
excited.
Yeah.
All right.
Did you get Green Contract?
Yes, we did, yes.
Yeah.
Nikki,
Any more?
Nikki already, she told me she got him.
Okay, next we
Always
have
got
a notice of
meeting.
intent for the Dudek property at 53 North Road, repair and raise existing revetment.
Oh, that one.
Royal Ferrowski, Land and Sea Engineering. Mr. Dubek has a property on the North River, approximately about a half a mile north of the other property. Ironically, it's the exact same geometry as 11 River Pine, it's the same west to east bend in the river. In this case, this redevelopment was licensed and put in long ago. It's approximately 180 feet long. The reason Mr. Dubek contacted us was that mostly on the corner by his boat dock, he's had overtopping and some erosion of his plant. He has a planting strip in there with roses. So he basically, wanted us to basically repair the wall and raise it up to about 6 inches in the areas that it has either dilapidated or needed. We are not here to tear out this wall or re-put it in. We were very specific about that. So the extent of the work would be realigning, replacing stones above mean high water mostly, and doing minor grouting if needed, and then raising the wall in any areas up to 6 inches above the existing grade. We would then shim this planting strip and add in any other planting strips where we're doing any work where it's physically possible and plant those as noted. The extent of the work is mostly handwork. We're not bringing in big machines, we're not doing any of that. Dan, who is here, is the landscaper, is basically, I had a conversation with him before he left. What we propose to do is in the area of this first visible planting strip, he's gonna keep any roses that are viable and add roses with a 2-foot maximum spacing between plants. And then any other place we can get in here and put planting strips, we're gonna put in he said bayberry, blueberry, and anything else on the approved list. He'd be happy to come up with a plan and work with Amy on that if you require it. He's gonna work to remove any invasive species which do exist along that area. And it does go all the way over to the road. He did express the fact that he was gonna have trouble keeping anything alive under this tree canopy.
Yep.
So, in some places in there, there's trees. There's not too much damage on the wall there. We're probably gonna be doing very little over there. The main part of the project is what you see here. In terms of access, it's gonna be across the lawn, wheelbarrow, that type of thing. And that's, you know, pretty much it. In terms of, you know, the only other concern that you might have is like control of grout or whatever. All grout is gonna be bucket, hand thrown grout into the wall at low tide, so it'll have a chance to set before any water comes back in, so none of that will wash back out. It's common practice. There is not too much of that either. Any soil that is brought in will be clean fill. You can see the pictures in detail on the plan of the, you know, the main erosion's over in the corner, and then there's some other erosion here. So, you know, what we'd like this to look at, like when it's done, is a healthy wall with nice planting strips for filtration. And any concerns, you know, again, James, that you have with the lawn, anything like that, Dan, we can address that in terms of being in compliance with all the current regulations. I know they are coming back at a later date with more landscaping things, so, but that's not part of this filing, and I can answer any questions to my ability.
Thank you. Amy, any summary thoughts?
Sure. Well, I'll start with the plantings. So if they're coming back with some more landscaping things, maybe, because you said Dan was amenable to removing invasives. There's a heavy patch of them here, and then kind of along the top of the bank. For the most part, so I would recommend, other than having to get through to get access to the wall, which you're saying is pretty much, you know, on foot with a wheelbarrow, maybe we leave the majority of the invasive work to another, the other plan, if there's one coming in. Because you don't need to remove all these invasives in order to get into the top of the wall. You need to kind of create a path through to get in.
Yeah.
So, as far as, you know, those minor removal in here, I would agree with the, that's something, it's going to be minor, and I can work with Dan about if there's to be replanting kind of in the treed area. In the more exposed area on the slope, where it is pretty much roses and some mulch, I would, since you're going to be bringing the wall up about 6 inches and filling behind it, instead of mulch, I'd recommend, and I'll talk about it with Dan, too, is in addition to roses and is the bearberry, which would create a nice ground cover in between. It's working very well on the other site that we just saw in a very similar situation, and it would create a really nice buffer strip in and amongst roses, as well as possibly bayberry or beach plum there. Understanding they have a view, and they've had this since this house is 1815, I believe.
Yeah, it's old.
Yeah. So, and the wall's not that old, but it's old. So, okay, so the planting, at first glance when we went through this, I thought it was going to be much more extensive of a top of bank disturbance than it is going to be. So I don't think we need a real formalized planting plan for here. I'm comfortable I could work with the landscaper on that. If it's really only going to be people with wheelbarrows moving stones. So you're top of the wall here, saying, so there's no, just to clarify for the commission, no toe stone work being done, no big rock work being done. It's kind of filling in gaps with either rock or grout, and then adding at most 6 inches on the top.
Yes, Mr. Dubek was explicit that he wanted this to last his lifetime, and he's retired, so.
Okay, so this is not a major.
This is not.
You're not pulling it apart.
No.
Yeah.
Is it
That
gonna be
was-
mortar like the rest of the wall is?
The top,
You were-
yeah, we're gonna mortar it.
What
The
you're
top.
What you're adding?
You said grout kind of as needed.
Yeah.
Not much.
It seems like a rehab more than,
That's basically
is.
what it is, to
Yeah.
refresh her up. You know, some parts of the wall are that high already,
Yeah.
we're only, and it's really this area right
Yep.
here that
The
gets it.
exposed
That,
area.
I know.
So when, I think, whenever you come in for a wall repair, I always think it's gonna be bigger than this. This really is very minor. So we were on site, I mean, we're looking at this, and it's hard to, you know, how are they gonna do this? Are they gonna pull it apart? They don't need to pull it apart. They're just
No.
gonna add a little bit on top.
Yeah.
It may not, it may last 10, 20 years, it may not last 50 years, without repair. But, this is just kind of a, just temporary.
yep, a little less tidal
Improvement.
velocity at this point in the river.
Yep.
So,
Yep, so I'm good with it.
okay. I guess we'll go around quickly. Anybody?
No
comments?
questions?
Mark?
I'm just concerned about the amount of grouting, because it looks to me like a lot of it's, deteriorated, and I think when you get in and start cleaning it up, you're gonna find that there's maybe a little bit more than expected.
Well, if you look at the lower parts, I explicitly asked the owner, I go, you want us to redo this whole wall? And he called it a patch. So, you know, I guess the way you can condition it is that we're not gonna pull out any, you know, we're not gonna go out and sandblast and do all that. We're just gonna add to what's there, in minor work. He was pretty explicit about it. He's not looking at a big project. I don't know how you could,
Do you need to grout?
for the new rock, for it to attach,
Okay.
we do. Because see how they overtopped it? They just threw it on top.
Right, it's just kind
You know,
of.
some of that they're gonna pull off.
Okay.
And, you know, the problem is there's water there at all tides. So in terms of anything going into the water, you know, you can't, you know, you can do what you can do. Every effort could be made to pull it back first. We can certainly have, and if needed, you know, if you think stuff's gonna fall in, we can video it before and after.
I'm not so much concerned about that, I'm just, when you start to patch it, and you start moving anything loose around, to make enough room to accept the new grout,
Yeah,
you have to remove
some of the old
the
grout.
older stuff to
Yeah.
get enough to pack in. And my concern is that when you get in there and you start poking around, you got a whole lot more hole there, and more cavity than you might anticipate. Just to go along with so from the beginning of the dock, you're gonna carry the new stone how far down?
The elevation shots on it, it's gonna carry probably to this corner where this tree canopy is. And we're not gonna run the rest of it, because in here doesn't get the
Right.
wave action overtopping, so there's no need for it to be higher there.
Okay,
So that's 50 feet.
Yeah, 50, 60 feet.
And that's all. You know, you can see when you walk out there where the erosion was.
Yep.
And that's why he called. He's like, he went out there and he's like, oh, you know. I don't think he, and I tried to explain it numerous times, you know, about, you know, you're gonna do this again at some point if you don't do the whole thing, but he
Right.
was explicit that it's just a patch repair
Alright.
type of work that he wants done.
That lasts his lifetime.
How old is he?
Retired, so.
Well, if he was smart, he retired at 22.
I think he's normal.
Okay.
Standard retirement. And then, I just have one question for Amy in this. With that other stuff, you know, for
The plants.
the plants and the other work they want, if this is approved, could we amend this one for that, or because it's different, or would we file a new one?
It's probably best to file it, keep the rock work separately.
Okay.
But once you have an idea of what that other stuff's gonna be, send me is it gonna be an NOI? We don't know. Is it, you know, we'll,
I mean, Dan will discuss it with you when you determine
yeah.
what it's gonna be.
Yeah, we might be able to, my inclination is always to keep stuff that's happening on the rest of the property separate than your
That was what I-
waterfront structures. But
Okay, thank you.
when I see what they have planned, we can talk about it.
All right, Jim?
Yeah, no real concerns with the rock work. Just see the area replanted. I don't know if you said we don't need a plan.
Okay,
but,
yeah. I'll put it in the order of conditions, the density at the top here, and a couple species, varieties, and we can work with Dan on that.
So there's maybe like no mulch, and either
No
the
mulch.
bearberry would be great, or some native grass. or
Native seed
just so
mix.
it becomes like a little bit of a buffer strip with.
They are getting some top-down erosion there, a little bit.
Help with all that too.
Yep.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, that's fine.
Just explain the top 6 inches, is that like just a rock thrown?
So they're
right?
gonna,
Rock-
they're,
small
yeah,
rocks
they're
and
gonna
found
break
and
off,
ordered?
they're gonna break off the loose
The
grout
cap,
that's there,
yep.
and they're just gonna set
Just small.
small stones and drop them in.
Just like single,
Yep, one row.
okay. Just
I know, it's hard
curious.
to believe, it's minor. Threw me off.
That's all I,
Well, I mean, you have, it's kinda, it was almost, I'm like, why didn't you just do it? But then, you know, it is
Thank
in
you
your
for not.
preview that, you know,
If we're not doing it, we would know.
so.
Victor?
So, talking about roses, and I didn't like take in what roses were there, but
They're
you're
more
talking about
ornamental.
well, ornamental roses are probably not appropriate there because they're gonna be, you
They
don't,
weren't
you
doing
don't,
that well anyway.
you don't do ornamental roses without feeding them heavily, and that
They
you
weren't
definitely
doing
don't
well.
want that happening there. So I would just suggest,
Native planting strip there.
well, you can do roses, but they can be, you know,
Native.
native roses,
Yep.
either, well, there's a couple of varieties that are appropriate, like they were doing them in the last.
Carolina and Virginia rose,
Right.
yeah.
So, and then the other thing is just going back to the 6 inches of stone here, the cross-section says 1.5 feet, so I'm a little confused about that.
That is in the corner.
Mean over by the
Over by
dock?
the dock.
By the dock.
Oh, so that's where it's really
Where it's all
low.
Low.
dropped down there. So that is incorrect by me in my cross section. My plan was to add 6 inches, and then I took the section here where I measured it.
Yeah.
That's why where I drew the section.
So is it more accurate to say you're building to like, looks like 8.5 feet above mean low water? Is that what you're really doing, targeting an elevation,
Yeah,
not?
that's approximately 6 inches above the majority of the wall.
I see, okay.
I apologize for that not being clear. We're not trying to raise this whole thing. If you look what's scarfed out.
Yeah, I know, it was lower there, yeah, right.
So
okay.
that's where I took the section, so that's.
I see, okay.
Okay, that was concerning me as well, because like, when you look at the wall, you see there's definitely
Yeah,
an
that's why
elevation
I
difference.
cut the section there, so that's why. it
Okay,
was-
all right, that makes
I
sense.
apologize.
Do you have a file number for this one?
You done? Okay. How do people feel? Are the things that we want to see in addition? Are we comfortable with this one moving forward?
We don't have a file number yet either.
Okay, so we have to wait. Okay.
But is there any substantive questions you have? Because next time I'll probably draft order of conditions if you
Yeah.
are feeling good about this, ready to go.
Yeah. I think we are. We need to wait until we have the number, right?
Yeah, we do have to wait.
Yeah, okay. I don't really have any questions for more information. Does anybody have something like that, or? Okay.
Will you set a grade elevation form to finish with?
Yes.
All right, I think you're in good shape.
It's actually comment, it's number 3 in the plan.
Yeah.
So this will be a continuance for now then?
Yep.
Yeah. You want to come back on the 7th, or?
Yeah, I will probably have Dan or a representative come back,
Okay.
just to iron, just in case, because it seems like you might have more planting
Yeah.
questions for him ironed out than that. Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, then I guess we'll move that we continue the hearing till November 7th.
Yep.
We've got it.
Was that a motion? I'll
Yeah,
make a
yeah.
motion to
Yes.
continue the hearing for
Starting to
53
shut
North
down here.
Road. Repair and raise existing revetment until November 7th.
A second.
We got a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for hanging in there. Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Clock goes off in 7 hours, less than 7 hours.
All right.
Probably won't.
Yeah.
Can we,
So Amy, what can we cut off the agenda to get out of here?
well, the rest is real quick.
Okay.
But we do have a gentleman here from the Old Mill Point Association. So, we should, and he has photographic evidence. I had it under discussion to discuss kind of what to do with the wall and, lawn and walkway and all that stuff. So, you can feel free to come up if you like.
Sure.
But he has evidence that it's been there since before 1978, so maybe we don't need to do an enforcement.
My name is Gerard Fisher. I live at 35 Strandway, and I kind of stumbled upon this because I saw it in the agenda and heard about it at the last hearing on 53. So, and I understand that 78 is the magic number.
Yep.
And here are some pictures.
Dated.
And I confirmed with the Kelsey Kennard Airview Gallery in Chatham that the 77 means
That's amazing.
1977.
Yep.
And you know which one the property is?
Yep.
This one is 72.
So, just so you all know, it's this one. On the side of the jetty. The house has changed since.
Yeah, exactly. This one is 72
Yep.
at the wall, so that's the earliest one we have.
Again, right to the right of the jetty.
Actually, that's not true. This one I'm getting from historicaerials.com,
Yep.
which is 1971. This is just a proof. I'll have the actual picture tomorrow. Once again,
Yeah.
there it is.
Wonderful to email to me.
Yeah, sure. I'll leave these if I could have those, just because.
Why don't you just take everything, you just email me.
Okay.
Okay, well,
That's good, no, I mean, so,
Yeah, I didn't know how far down this road we should go. Again, I'm not,
That's right.
I'm not
Yep.
officially representing the,
That's right.
this is what we kinda needed to know, because,
yeah.
so whether or not Old Mill Point or the Dodarios, whether Old Mill Point pursues trying to gain their land back, that's up to them now. In my mind, we have evidence that this wall predates regulation, that lawn and everything predates regulation. My mind is not an enforcement action at this point in time. So it's really up to the Dodarios and the Old Mill Point Association about how they want to deal with that sliver of land in the future. I mean, I think it's still within the buffer zone, so if there are any changes, if Old Mill Point decides they want to take the wall out, or they still have to come back to us, but I don't think there's an enforcement action at this time.
I see.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep, I would agree.
Yeah, and I would love a scanned copy of those photos.
Absolutely.
A lot of properties, not many trees back then, huh?
Wide open.
What's scary is when you see how far out
I know.
the beach goes relative to the jetty
Yep.
and where it is now.
Yeah.
Really big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the west side of the jetty, which is supposed to be where
The good
it's, yeah,
side.
the good side.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so nothing else to do on that?
No, we don't have to act on it.
Okay.
So,
Well, thank you for hanging in there.
Thank
you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank
Stuck
you.
around for a long
Admire
time.
your stamina too.
Well,
we're almost done.
it's waning, as you can imagine. Quickly.
So,
Thank you very much.
let's quickly, thank you. Let's do the orders and conditions. For Nons Road and 18 Strandway. Nons Road first, please. 18 Nons Road.
Is this pre-me?
No, this was the additions, this was the chimney.
Oh, right, okay, right.
The chimney and the front porch additions.
So both of these are last meeting.
Yep. That's typically how they are. If we vote on something in the next meeting, we have the permit conditions. I don't think I put the fertilization on here. Should.
Yeah, you said chemical application in number 8? Yeah, number.
I think I put it in, I think I put that in general to encompass herbicides, fertilizers. If you want me to be more specific, I can.
I think we've been pretty consistent by not just saying chemical.
Yep, I can.
I think we should spell them out.
pretty much the entire, most of the properties within the 50. So I just said nothing on the property, because the whole property is purview. As far as fertilizers or chemical application, there shouldn't be any. I'll add that.
Beyond that, I have no comments on either one.
Okay,
Questions on Strandway?
I do too.
well, let's do this one first.
Nons?
Yeah,
Yeah, I have no comments on that.
all right. That sounds like a motion.
No, I can't.
Oh, that's, oh.
I'll make a
I'm
motion
sorry.
to approve the order of conditions for 19 Nons Road. Additions, with the addition of the condition on
Yeah.
fertilizer, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides being prohibited in perpetuity.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It's getting late, don't worry.
Strandway,
All right, here's,
Uh,
please,
uh,
sorry,
number-
send that around.
number 12, we've got this thing about the 3-year shellfish service. And I apologize, I meant to be at this meeting, I wanted to be at this meeting, but I wasn't. And my question is, so what? You do surveys for 3 years, what are you gonna do with them?
Well, no, that was part of my question. The first, initially, they had proposed 1 year at the end of 1 year, do a survey, and if there had been any deterioration of the shellfish, they would do additional mitigation
Okay.
around that area, in addition to the 30 bushels a
Okay.
year.
But when I asked them specifically, what mitigation can you do? And they said, probably nothing.
No, they did say at the end of year 1, if it had changed,
They would add
they would
specific
add,
things to that.
they would do additional
It's
mitigation.
kind of nonsense. I mean, if someone goes out there and shellfishes, then
Right,
there's
and
that
Right,
shit, you
yeah.
know.
So here's what I was hoping would have happened at the meeting would be that, I mean, our whole hangup with this dock was that it would have a negative impact on shellfish habitat. Was there any discussion about if it showed a deterioration over 3 years, he takes the dock out?
Yeah, there was no discussion, because the discussion was that they said, how can you prove what caused the deterioration? It could be other factors.
I have been thinking about that whole dock scenario. Maybe a meeting where we don't have more time to look at that language and try and decide what we want it to be, so it's not so. Because to me, that language that was that docks are prohibited in mapped shellfish areas. That might be because someone wants to go there and bull rake in the winter or shellfish in the summer, and you can't because there's a dock there.
Right.
And it was holding the line on all these docks, and now it's
Yeah.
not anymore.
Right.
So I mean, we could change that language to so it would effectively prohibit docks in shellfish areas, or if it's
Address this
or if it's
order of
not going to
conditions.
work,
Oh,
then
right, this
then-
particular one, it wouldn't, but
What's that?
this particular instance.
Oh no.
I would have hoped that we could have had an agreement that if there was significant deterioration in the shellfish habitat, then the dock comes out.
That's not practical.
Yeah,
Why?
It's
Why
not.
is that
No,
not practical?
Number one, you're never gonna see a difference in 1, 2, 3 years. So it's a.
Well, then what's the point of asking for the survey?
I voted against the project. I don't think it's a good idea to, the survey's in there.
So,
It's,
can I just say, though, there is one reason to do the survey. It may not, be a big deal, but, I mean, my short-term observation in these arguments is people don't really understand what's going on. There is no agreement on what the effect of a
Right.
dock is. There's not any hard data. What you're doing by doing the surveys is getting a little more information
So
about.
it's our benefit more
but-
than anybody else's.
Yeah.
Well, and we need that. We need a lot more of that, in my view, than we have right now, and I'd like to see a lot more of that.
To back up
And
our
it's
decisions.
not gonna, I agree with Brad. If we tried after 3 years to tell this guy that he had to take his dock out,
Oh, I would have made it conditional upon his agreeing to that up front.
well, but
Well,
Because it was such a close
the whole
issue.
thing would
I
have,
mean, the
It's
whole
close.
thing was so contentious from day one,
yeah.
and I think he probably got this approval by the skin of his teeth. And,
Yeah.
You know,
Well, the other issues were some of the cases where docks were ruled against the commission because they couldn't prove. They don't have the data to prove.
Yeah.
It's case
So,
law
in this case,
versus
if we had conditioned this
laws on the books.
3-year survey, deterioration of the shellfish habitat, you agree today, before we approve this thing, that you'll take your dock out, I would have been comfortable with that.
We might
This,
have been able to
this,
vote it
this
down,
is,
but
what?
we might have been able to vote it down if,
Yeah.
We can always talk about a future moratorium of docks, new docks on the Herring River.
And I suspect it's too late to revisit this.
Yeah,
This one we can't.
It's already been approved,
It is.
right?
It's approved.
Yeah,
It's- the
we
votes
can't
weren't there, and
condition
that's what
more than
happened.
what we've
something
discussed in
simple
open
like
meeting.
200-foot minimum spacing, or, you know, something that's just not so arguable.
I recommend we have this discussion later. I have no stomach for it right now.
Yeah.
I don't,
Okay.
I'm not happy with the process went. They got the votes, so it passed.
So,
I've got to get up at 5
Bottom line, with respect to
o'clock,
that comment, then we'll leave it in. Provides us with some educational information, hopefully for the future, and move forward.
So, how do you feel about, did I miss anything else in these conditions?
I don't see anything.
Just if there's gonna be any additional mitigation at the end of the year.
Did we hold them to that? If there was.
That was their
All right,
proposal.
so after 1 year, if there is evidence of degradation, there's additional mitigation required?
I don't remember that. I'd go.
That was marked.
I'd have to
I'd go to the
watch.
minutes. Yeah, I'd go to the minutes to be sure. I'm not sure that.
That was their proposal. That was marked. That's how he started off the
I
conversation.
vaguely remember it, so I'll go back.
Yeah.
Oh,
My
that's
recollection
something.
is they said there wasn't any mitigation they could actually do, aside from, more seed.
Well, I think they said they would directly look, make sure they seeded this area, because the seed could go anywhere in the Herring River. All right. Put that in, I'll check that, and if it's true, I'll put it in.
That was when they originally did the 1-year proposal, and then we
Yep.
expanded the 3 years.
No, I do remember, I'll just revisit the tape to look at the exact wording for it.
I can't vote on this, can I? Because I couldn't vote
Right.
last time, so I'm not.
So we okay otherwise to approve the order conditions for 18 Strandway?
yeah, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so I move we approve the order conditions for 18 Strandway.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Please sign,
I'm
abstain.
abstained.
Yep, so we got 4 ayes.
Yep, we're good. 2 quick certifieds, recommending certs for both of them. Do a quick little write-up on the site summary there. Do them together if you want.
You've got recommendations before us to approve them
Yep,
both?
it's on your site. So the first is for Sequata Lane, raise and replace existing house. Has a special condition of no fertilizer irrigation. Nikki went out and said, it's green, there's no sprinkler heads. She saw no evidence that proves fertilization. We could just send a reminder too about that, but she recommends a certificate. The house was completed accordingly. And for 24 Catherine Rose, a small addition completed as planned. There were no special conditions at the time, and she recommends a certificate of compliance.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve the previously mentioned certificates of compliance.
Seconded? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion's carried for both.
Sign. There are 2 coming.
All right, Amy, anything else?
Meeting schedule is the same. I'd like to, I mean, we could set it now and talk about specific dates if you're concerned. I'd like to set it because the calendar is quickly filling up and I don't want to lose room, so we're gonna keep it the first and third Wednesday evenings of the month. With the exception, there's like a holiday or
It's 4th of July,
the 4th of July.
you're moving it one day early, to the 2nd instead of the 3rd.
Yes, put it on this. We were supposed to meet the 3rd of July at night. I thought we should meet the 2nd of July. Sound okay to you?
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was the main change. Are you guys okay with the schedule?
Yep. Do we need to vote on the schedule, or?
If you could, that would be great.
I don't know about January 2nd, that could be a tough day.
All right, I
We can move it if we
Yeah.
have
moved it,
to.
we approved the schedule posted for the Conservation Commission 2019. Do we have a seconded?
A second.
Seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
We could do June 6 minutes, or if you want, we could put them on next time. It doesn't matter to me.
I changed it, I can give you
Okay.
What's the preference of everybody? I have not read them.
I don't really want to take more time tonight. Just do it next time.
Yeah, let's do them next time.
Even though we had a lot of continuances tonight, a lot of it was for small things.
just so you don't have to.
Thank you, I appreciate it. There's some new stuff, but I don't think it's gonna be as heavy as this one, as hard as
The
this
real
one.
problem is marking this project.
Yeah.
We dodged a bullet with a couple continuances. Could have been worse.
You have no,
Yeah.
okay, so we need to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Time to get some dinner.
Oh, boy.
Jeez.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
It goes back in your bag.
Oh, boy, yes, I'll take all your clips.
What's that bag is?
Oh, it's name tags and clips.
And we should have a discussion on the shellfish issue at some point.
Yeah.
We gotta have a chunk of time, you know.
So, just parting thought, I was reading
Make sure
something, I don't even,
Holly's-
oh, it was like a list of projects
Is that
at Antioch College in Ohio, and
that off?
somebody
Oh, hold on.
was
Wait a minute.
studying